Please like, share, and subscribe. Wishing you happiness and good luck every day.
All right, let's talk about something that's literally all around us, but we barely even notice it. I'm talking about anonymity. You know, it's there when you're paying for your coffee. It's there when you're posting online. It's this invisible force at play in, well, pretty much everything we do.
So, let me ask you something. Just think about your day-to-day. When was the last time you were completely anonymous? I mean, a moment where nobody knew who you were and there was absolutely no trace left behind that you were ever there. It's a lot harder to pinpoint than you'd think, isn't it?
Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this, we've got to go back to basics, back to the very beginning. And this idea, it's definitely not new. Actually, the word itself gives us a huge clue about what it's all about.
So the word anonymity, it actually comes from the Greek word anonymia, and the meaning is just so simple and perfect, without a name or nameless. And really, that's the core of it, right? Doing something without your name attached to it.
But what does being nameless really mean in practice? Well, it kind of breaks down into three key parts. It means you're not identifiable, so nobody knows who you are. It means you're untraceable, so there's no paper trail leading back to you. And finally, it means you're unreachable. No one can find you or get in touch with you after the fact.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Non-identifiable, untraceable, it all sounds very James Bond, right? But honestly, anonymity is something we all use every single day, probably without even realizing it. Let me show you what I mean with a couple of super simple examples.
Okay, picture this. You're walking down the street and you need to know the time. You just tap a stranger on the shoulder and ask. They tell you, you say thanks, and you both go on your way. Simple.
That interaction, that was completely anonymous. You didn't introduce yourselves, you didn't swap numbers. Why would you? It would actually be kind of weird if you did. In situations like that, anonymity is just the default setting. It's the normal, expected thing to do.
Or how about this one? You pop into a corner store, grab some bread and milk, and pay with a $20 bill. The clerk gives you your change, you walk out. That's it. They have no idea who you are, and there is zero record of that purchase connected to your name.
And this right here, this is a really important distinction. Paying with cash, that's anonymous, it's untraceable. But the second you pull out a credit or debit card, everything changes. Instantly, that purchase is tied to your name, to your bank account. It becomes another little data point in your permanent digital footprint. It is absolutely 100% not anonymous anymore.
So here's where it gets really interesting. Anonymity itself, it's not good or bad, it's completely neutral. You can think of it like a tool, maybe like a hammer. You can use it to build a house, or you can use it to break a window. It's all about how it's used.
I mean, on the one hand, think about someone who donates a ton of money to a good cause. They could get their name on a building, right? But instead, they say, no, I just want to help. I don't want any recognition. That's anonymity being used for something truly selfless. But then you've got the flip side. That exact same shield of being nameless can be used to get away with something terrible. Someone commits a crime, and their first thought is, they'll never know it was me. In that case, anonymity is all about dodging responsibility and escaping the consequences.
And if you look around, these anonymous roles are everywhere in our society. Think about voting in a free election. That's anonymous by law to protect you from pressure. Or what about an anonymous witness to a crime? Their identity is hidden to keep them safe. You even see it with writers or high-level advisors in business and politics who need to give candid advice without fear of backlash. It's actually a pretty crucial part of how a lot of things work.
Okay, so we've covered the real world. Now let's get to the main event, anonymity on the internet. Because this is where things get way more complicated and, frankly, way more important for how we live our lives today.
So what does it even mean to be anonymous online? Well, it's about protecting your identity, sure, but it's not just from the other people you're talking to. The really crucial part is protecting your identity from any third parties that might be watching in the background. And trust me, that second part is everything.
And you see this idea all over the place online, right? On Q&A sites where you can ask embarrassing questions, on blogs or forums like Twitter or 4chan where you can post your real thoughts under a pseudonym, even on dating or networking sites. But one of the most interesting examples, and the most complicated, is something called secure billing.
Yeah, secure billing. That phrase sounds great, doesn't it? It sounds safe, private, anonymous. But this is exactly where things start to get a little tricky. There's often a hidden catch. Something I like to call the third-party problem.
Let's just walk through a super common example, PayPal. Okay, so you buy something on eBay. You go to checkout and you pay with PayPal.
Now, from your point of view, it feels pretty anonymous because the seller never sees your personal bank info or your credit card number. And that part's true. But, and this is a huge but, PayPal sees everything. They are right in the middle, watching the whole thing.
See, PayPal is what we call a trusted third party. They're the middleman. And because they're in the middle, they have a ton of power. They can see what you buy, they can limit your account, they can even block a transaction if they don't approve of it. And they've got all your data. So yeah, you might be anonymous to the seller, but you are definitely not anonymous to the system.
And this exact problem is the whole reason things like cryptocurrencies were invented in the first place. The original idea, the entire point, was to figure out a way to send money from one person to another without needing a big, powerful company like a bank or PayPal sitting in the middle watching everything. The goal was to cut out that middleman.
So that leaves us with a really big question to chew on. In this digital world that's basically built on these middlemen, on these third parties who are always collecting our data, if there's always someone watching, are you ever truly anonymous online? You know, when Bitcoin first came on the scene, one of its biggest selling points was privacy, right? This idea of total anonymity. But what if I told you that whole thing is basically a myth? So, let's just get right to it. Let's ask the big question straight up. Is Bitcoin truly anonymous? Well, the short answer, a big, fat no. In fact, the reality is the exact opposite of what most people believe. Every single Bitcoin transaction is out there in the open for the entire world to see. Okay, so to really get why this is, we got to look at how this whole thing actually works. And the best way to think about it is this. Your Bitcoin wallet isn't like a normal wallet you keep in your pocket. Nope, it's more like a glass box.
It all boils down to the blockchain. I mean, that's the magic behind Bitcoin, right? But here's the thing. The blockchain, by its very nature, is a public ledger, like a public record book. And this wasn't some mistake. It was designed that way. It's how Bitcoin works without a bank. Everyone can see the ledger, so everyone can trust it.
And this is where it gets kinda wild. Think about it. When you pay with cash, the barista just sees the $10 bill. That's it. End of story. But with Bitcoin, whoa. That same barista could, in theory, look up your wallet address and see, well, everything. Your entire transaction history, how much you have in your wallet right now, the whole shebang.
Yeah, like the quote says, if I give you $10 and you give it to a friend, there's no way to trace it back to me. The trail goes cold. With Bitcoin, that trail never goes cold. It's a permanent, unbroken chain that's out there forever.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. This is real. You can literally go to this website right now and watch a live feed of Bitcoin transactions as they happen. You'll see money moving from one wallet to another, clear as day. It's all just out there.
All right, so everything's public. You might be thinking, so what? What's the big deal? Well, that's what we're going to get into next, because this transparency, it comes with some pretty serious real-world risks. Let's bring this home for a second. What if the person you just paid for coffee could suddenly see your life savings? Seriously, imagine that. Would you be comfortable with that? I mean, this opens up a whole can of worms. If someone sees you have a big balance, your wallet instantly becomes a target for hackers and criminals. Your entire net worth is just exposed. And think about businesses. Your payments could reveal sensitive deals or partnerships, and because it's all linked, one transaction reveals all the others. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. I have nothing to hide, so who cares? And you know what? That's a super common response. But let's dig into that a little, because maybe it's not really about hiding things. Here's a quote that really makes you think, right? Those who say they have nothing to hide most probably want to hide something. It's a bit provocative, sure, but the point is, privacy isn't just for people doing shady stuff. It's a basic human need. We don't broadcast everything we do we? And there are a million perfectly normal reasons you'd want financial privacy. Maybe you want to donate to a cause without getting a bunch of junk mail or being put on some list. Maybe you're in the middle of a business negotiation. Or hey, maybe you just don't want your nosy neighbor knowing what you buy online. This is everyday stuff.
And believe me, this isn't some tiny fringe issue. We're talking about over 760,000 people. That's 750,000 people who are actively looking for a solution to this. That's a huge movement.
Okay, so maybe only 10% of people say they care about privacy. But I've got to wonder about that other 90%. Have they really truly thought about what it would be like if every single dollar or Bitcoin they ever spent was recorded in a public book forever? So where do we go from here? If Bitcoin is public by design, what's the answer? Well, it's not about getting rid of Bitcoin. It's about having a choice. It's about creating something that acts like digital cash.
And that's where something called privacy coins come in. These are cryptocurrencies designed from the get-go with privacy in mind. They use all this cool, complex math to basically make transactions untraceable and confidential. They pull a curtain over that glass box we talked about.
And here's the most important part, really. This is all optional. Nobody is forcing you to use this stuff. It's simply about giving people a choice. The choice to keep their financial life private, just like you have the choice to use cash today.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. As pretty much our entire world goes digital, shouldn't our money have the option to be digital too? And shouldn't it have the option to be private, just like the cash we've used for centuries?
You hear the word cryptocurrency thrown around all the time, right? But what does it actually mean? Turns out a whole lot of projects are using that label when maybe they shouldn't. So today, we're going to cut through all that marketing noise and get down to what really makes a crypto a crypto. And to kick things off, I've got a question for you, one that really gets to the heart of all this confusion. Is Ripple, with its token XRP, is it actually a cryptocurrency? Now, the answer here might not be what you think, and honestly, it's the key to unlocking this whole space. All right, so let's dive into our first section. What is a cryptocurrency? We're going to use Ripple as our little case study here to get a super clear definition of what really separates a plain old digital currency from a true cryptocurrency. Okay, now let's be fair. Ripple is a super valuable protocol, no doubt about it. Its whole purpose is to help move regular money, dollars, euros, that kind of thing, across borders fast and cheap. And yeah, it uses its own token, XRP, to get that done. But, and this is a big but, this is where things start to get a little tricky. And here it is, the absolute key detail. When you send XRP, the validation, the part that says, yep, this is a legit transaction, that's all handled by a specific pre-approved group of people. It's not done by fancy math puzzles, not by cryptographic proofs. And that single difference right there is everything. That's what separates it from being a real cryptocurrency. So that brings us to section 2, the 2 golden rules. You might be thinking, okay, so what? Why is that one little detail about validation such a big deal? Well, it's because it leads us directly to the 2 unbreakable golden rules that define what a crypto is. And once you know these, trust me, you'll have a superpower for seeing through all the marketing fluff. It really all boils down to this one core definition. A cryptocurrency uses something called cryptographic proofs to validate transactions. The easiest way to think about it is like this. They're super complex math puzzles that only computers can solve. The whole system relies on pure math, not a person, not a bank, not some special committee you have to trust. So you ready? Here they are, the 2 golden rules. Rule number 1, it has to use those cryptographic proofs, the computer math puzzles, for validation. And rule number 2, the entire system has to be decentralized. That just means no one's in charge. No CEO, no central server, no boss. It's a system that runs itself. If a project doesn't tick both of those boxes, well, it's just not a true cryptocurrency. Simple as that. Okay, let's move on to section 3, banks versus the blockchain. To really get a feel for how this all works, let's put the technology behind crypto, the blockchain, side by side with something we all know really well, a good old-fashioned bank. So at the most basic level, they're actually pretty similar. Both banks and blockchains use what's called a ledger. And a ledger is just a fancy word for a record book, right? It just tracks who has what. Your bank account is just an entry in the bank's ledger, and your crypto wallet is an entry in the blockchain's ledger. But here's the massive difference. It's how they keep that record book. A bank's ledger is centralized. It's one private book locked away and controlled by one company, the bank. A blockchain is the total opposite. It's a decentralized ledger. Imagine thousands and thousands of copies of that same record book, all shared across a huge network of computers all over the world. No single person or company owns it or controls it. And this chart right here just makes it crystal clear. Look at the bank side. Centralized ledger, validation by humans. Now look at the blockchain side. Decentralized ledger, validation by computers using those cryptographic proofs. See, there are our 2 golden rules right there in action, decentralization and cryptographic proofs. All right, on to section 4. Welcome to the altcoins. So we've got our 2 golden rules down. But you're probably wondering, what about all the other thousands of coins? I mean, if Bitcoin was the first, where does everything else fit into the picture? Well, there's a simple term for them: altcoin. It's literally just short for alternative coin. The idea is, since Bitcoin was the granddaddy of them all, the very first true cryptocurrency, pretty much any other coin that also follows our 2 golden rules is just considered an altcoin. And this includes a ton of big names you've definitely heard of. We're talking about projects like Bitcoin Cash, Dash, Monero, Litecoin, and of course Ethereum. They all launched after Bitcoin, but they all stick to those same 2 fundamental rules. They're decentralized, and they use cryptographic proofs. Okay, last section, and this is a really important one. Section 5, the centralization warning. Because now that you have the tools to identify a real cryptocurrency, you also need to know how to spot the fakes, the imposters. Listen, there are so many projects out there that will shout from the rooftops that they use blockchain technology. They'll throw all the right buzzwords at you. But if you actually pop the hood and take a look, you'll find that a lot of them are just, well, they're just regular old centralized systems wearing a fancy disguise. You know, there's a quote that just perfectly sums this whole thing up. It says that if a project doesn't have that true decentralization and those cryptographic proofs, quote, they should be called a centralized database and nothing more. I mean, that's pretty blunt, right? But it's also so clarifying. So what's the big takeaway from all this? It's that you've got to be a critical thinker. Don't just fall for the shiny websites and the huge promises. The real test is always the same simple question. Does the tech actually follow our 2 golden rules? You have to question the fundamentals. So I'm going to leave you with a final thought to chew on. Now that you're armed with this knowledge, I want you to go back and take a hard look at the projects you're interested in, the coins you hold, and ask yourself this one simple question. Is your crypto really crypto? Thanks for tuning in. All right, today we're going to crack the code on a really fascinating corner of the crypto world: privacy coins. Let's dive into exactly how they work and, maybe more importantly, why they even exist. So, to get there, we have to start with a big, and I mean big, question. We've all heard the stories about Bitcoin, right? It's often painted as this untraceable, anonymous currency for the internet. But is that actually true? Well, the short answer, nope, not really. The best way to describe it is semi-anonymous. And that little word, semi, that changes absolutely everything. It's the huge gap between being almost private and being truly private. So let's talk about the problem here: Bitcoin's digital footprint. This is the whole reason why semi-anonymous just isn't the same as being fully private. Okay, so here's the deal. When you look at the blockchain, that giant public record of every transaction, you won't see anyone's actual name. But, and this is the crucial part, the digital wallet that holds the coins, that can often be traced back to a real person. It's less like an invisibility cloak and more like a mask that, with enough work, can be pulled right off. So you might be asking, how is that even possible? Well, investigators have a few pretty effective tools. They can start by just analyzing that public transaction history, connecting the dots from one wallet to another. Then they can link a wallet to a service provider, like an exchange where you had to upload your ID. And sometimes they can even trace a transaction all the way back to your computer's IP address. Every single step is like leaving a little breadcrumb that can lead right back to you. And that exact problem, the fact that you can be traced, is what sparked this whole quest for true privacy. It was basically a challenge to engineers and cryptographers. Can you build a currency where people can actually truly disappear? And this comparison just lays it out perfectly. On the one hand, you have Bitcoin, where that public visible history is a feature, not a bug. But for privacy coins, the entire goal is the exact opposite. They want to take that link between who sent what to whom and just break it, obscure it, make it impossible to follow. One of the first solutions to pop up was a pretty clever idea called a mixer. The concept is actually really simple. A bunch of people get together, throw their crypto into one big digital pot, and then shuffle it all up like a deck of cards. And here's the play-by-play of how it works. First, everyone sends their coins into this one shared pool. Then, the service just jumbles them all together, mixing everything up. And finally, you get clean, mixed coins sent back to you. The whole point is to make it so confusing that nobody can prove the coins you got out are connected to the ones you put in. But there's a catch. This isn't exactly foolproof. Sure, it makes tracing way harder, but it's not impossible. If you have enough computing power and expertise, you can sometimes unshuffle the data and figure out where the money went. And that kicked off this constant cat and mouse game between the privacy tech and the people trying to crack it. So because those simple mixers could be broken, the whole privacy space was forced to evolve. They had to come up with much more advanced techniques because they knew they had to go way beyond just shuffling coins around. And that brings us to one of the most powerful innovations in this space, something called a ring signature. This was a massive leap forward. The idea is, instead of just one person signing off on their transaction with their key, you group a bunch of users' keys together to authorize one single payment. Now, the genius here is that it does two incredible things at once. First, it proves to the network that, yes, this is a valid transaction from someone in the group. But, and this is the real magic, it completely hides which specific person in that group actually sent the money. Imagine 10 people all co-signing a single check. The check is valid for sure, but you have no idea who actually put up the cash. And then you've got some projects that take it to the absolute extreme. They use these incredibly complicated math problems, the whole proof of work thing, to approve transactions in a way that creates zero public history. None. If you don't create a trail of breadcrumbs to begin with, well, there's nothing to follow. So what's the big takeaway from all of this? The most important thing to remember is that digital privacy isn't just an on or off switch. It's really a whole spectrum of different methods, and each one has its own pros and cons when it comes to things like complexity, speed, and just how anonymous you really are. So just to recap the three main paths we've looked at. We started with a basic idea of coin mixers, which is all about pooling and shuffling your funds. Then we moved on to the more sophisticated ring signatures, which is like hiding the real sender in a crowd. And we finished with the no history methods, which is the ultimate goal of leaving no public trail at all. All of this innovation really leaves us with a huge question to think about. As our lives, especially our financial lives, become more and more digital and recorded forever on public ledgers, these technologies are only going to become more relevant. So the real question we have to ask ourselves is, what's the true price of privacy? And what are we willing to do to get it? Okay, let's talk about ICOs, or initial coin offerings. If you were around during the big crypto craze, you heard this term absolutely everywhere. It generated this massive buzz, but also a ton of controversy. So what were they really? Today, we're going to cut through all that hype and find out. So, here's the big question. At the time, ICOs were pitched as this revolutionary way for you, the average person, to get in on the ground floor of the next big thing. But was it a genuine opportunity, or was it all just a devastating trap? That's what we're trying to figure out here. All right, first things first. Let's break it all the way down. What exactly is an initial coin offering? What are we even talking about? You know, probably the easiest way to wrap your head around an ICO is to compare it to something we're all a bit more familiar with, an IPO, an initial public offering. When a company has an IPO, it sells shares to the public, but it's all under super strict government regulations. An ICO, on the other hand, it's more like a wild, global, unregulated crowdfunding campaign. And that one little difference, the complete lack of rules, well, that changes everything. So here's the more formal definition. An ICO is a way for a project to raise money. But here's the kicker, usually before they even have a finished product. Yeah, investors are essentially buying into an idea, maybe a fancy technical document called a white paper, and a whole lot of promises. And in exchange for their cash, they get brand new crypto tokens. And that right there, that really gets to the heart of the issue, doesn't it? When you're investing your hard-earned money in just an idea, with no product to see and zero regulatory oversight, the risk can be, well, astronomical. Let's really dig into just how massive that risk actually was. I mean, it's one thing to just throw around the word risky, right? But what does that actually mean in real terms? Just how bad did it really get during the peak of this whole ICO frenzy? Okay, just look at this. According to our source material, by the end of 2017, which was basically the year of the ICO, a mind-blowing 99% of all initial coin offerings were identified as scams. Let me say that again, 99%. That is not a typo. For an average person putting money in, that meant they had a 1 in 100 shot of picking a legitimate project. The odds were just insane. And this wasn't some slow burn either. The problem escalated with terrifying speed. I mean, halfway through 2017, things were already a disaster, with over 85% of ICOs being scams. But then, just a few months later, by the end of that same year, that number had climbed to a near total saturation. The space had become an absolute minefield for investors. So, to really understand how these scams worked in the real world, let's look at one of the most notorious examples. It was a project called OneCoin, which earned itself a pretty telling nickname, the unsellable coin. The hook they used was brilliant in its simplicity. OneCoin's promoters just went around calling it the next Bitcoin. And think about it. For tons of people who were just hearing about crypto for the very first time, that was all they needed to hear. They were convinced they were finally getting in early on a revolutionary opportunity. And this is how the trap snapped shut. First, investors could easily buy OneCoin from official distributors. No problem. The problem started when they tried to sell. That's when they'd discover that no online exchange would list the coin, and the same distributors who happily took their money simply refused to buy it back. The money only ever flowed in one direction, leaving investors holding completely worthless tokens. So, OneCoin was a pretty straightforward trap, but some of these scams were way more elaborate. Our next case study, BitConnect, was a massive and complex Ponzi scheme, all built on an absolutely impossible promise. The offer they made was almost comically unbelievable. You would loan the platform money, say $1,000, and they promised you 1% interest, not per year, but per day. After 240 days, you'd get your initial $1,000 back, plus $2,400 in profit. It sounds way too good to be true because, well, it was. And this is what happens when a Ponzi scheme inevitably collapses. The second BitConnect announced it was shutting down, panic selling started. The project's entire market value just evaporated. It plummeted from $2.7 billion to just $200 million in about a week, an absolute wipeout. And here's the final insult, the final twist of the knife. BitConnect actually did promise to refund investors, but they paid everyone in their own native BitConnect token, which by that point had become completely worthless. The refund was just the last stage of the deception. So, after walking through the mechanics and these pretty devastating case studies, what is the ultimate takeaway from our source material? Well, the author doesn't mince words. Yeah, it really doesn't get much clearer or more direct than that. The advice is unambiguous. Stay away. Given the overwhelming number of scams and the total lack of investor protection, the argument is that the risk simply isn't worth it. This quote just perfectly captures the attitude of so many of these failed or fraudulent projects. Because these things were centralized and unregulated, they could essentially just pull the plug anytime, walk away with the funds, and offer this kind of non-apology. Your money is just gone. So we'll end here. The stories of OneCoin and BitConnect are extreme, yes. But the lesson is timeless. Whether it's in crypto or any other part of life, when a deal sounds too good to be true, it's always worth asking yourself, is this a real opportunity, or am I the product being sold?
All right, let's talk crypto. It's this wild, exciting world where fortunes can be made, right? But it's also an absolute minefield of scams. So how in the world do you spot a real opportunity versus a trap that's just waiting to spring? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down. We're going to give you the tools you need.
I mean, you've seen this, haven't you? It pops up on your social media feed, maybe in an email, this promise that just grabs you. Guaranteed profit, double your money. It feels electric, doesn't it? And that's the point. It's pure bait, designed to switch off your logical brain and tap right into that little voice that's hoping for a quick, easy win.
And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? When you see a promise that huge, is it your lucky day or is something fishy going on? Let's just cut to the chase here. If it sounds too good to be true, it's almost definitely a trap.
Okay, so how do these scammers even get on your radar? Well, they've got a playbook, and it's actually pretty simple. Knowing how they operate is your best first defense. So let's pull back the curtain and see how they do it.
You can think of it like a 4-step funnel, and its only job is to get your money. Step 1. They pop up where you hang out, on platforms you trust, like YouTube, Twitter, you name it. Then, bam. Step 2. They bombard you with aggressive marketing. Those ads will then lead you to a website that looks super slick and professional, but it's totally fake. And then comes the knockout punch, the final hook. That promise, that guarantee of huge, unbelievable returns. But here's the good news. You are not powerless in this. Not at all. We've put together a checklist for you. 5 major red flags to look out for. Seriously, think of this as your personal scam detector. If you see even one of these, it's a huge sign to slam on the brakes and start asking some tough questions.
All right, let's get into it. Red flag number 1. We're talking about the website itself, what I like to call the website facade. Scammers are great at making their sites look legit, really professional. But it's all a front. And if you know where to look, you can see the cracks in that shiny exterior pretty fast.
So here's what you need to do. First, look for pictures of famous people. It's a classic move, right? They're just trying to borrow some credibility they haven't earned. Next, check out the About Us page. Is it even there? If it is it just filled with a bunch of vague, techie-sounding words that don't really say anything? And here's a big one, a real pro tip. Always, and I mean always, try the Contact Us link. If that link is broken or just doesn't exist, run. It's a massive red flag. Why? Because a real business wants you to contact them. Scammers, they want to be ghosts.
Okay, on to red flag number 2. And this one is probably the most powerful weapon a scammer has. It's the one that hooks people time and time again.
It's that promise of unreasonable returns. Remember the quote from the start? Double your money in a month. That right there is the bait on the hook. It's that super emotional promise of getting rich like tomorrow with absolutely no risk.
And this is where you have to separate fact from fiction. Look, scammers will throw around the word guarantee like it's nothing. But the reality of crypto, heck, the reality of any investing is that there are no guarantees, period. The market is crazy volatile. You can make huge gains, for sure, but you can also suffer massive losses. Anyone who guarantees you'll make money isn't an investor. They're just trying to take yours.
All right, red flag number 3. This one asks you to look past the hype and dig just a tiny bit deeper.
And it's all about having an unclear company purpose. You have to ask this really simple question that tells you so much. What does this company actually do? How do they make a profit?
So if that About Us page is just a bunch of buzzwords, a total word salad with no real meaning, that's a warning sign. If you can't figure out their actual business model, how they make money, be super suspicious. And if you reach out and ask them point blank, and all you get back are these vague, wishy-washy answers, that's your cue to leave. A real business will have real answers.
Okay, let's talk about red flag number 4. This one is super practical, super easy, and it takes like less than a minute. Think of it as your first quick background check. Simply check if the coin is listed on coinmarketcap.com. Now, if you're not familiar, CoinMarketCap is basically the phone book for the entire crypto universe. It's the go-to directory. So if a coin isn't even listed there, you need to be seriously, seriously careful.
And this is really important. While this is a great first step, it's not a silver bullet. You gotta remember that even some coins that get listed can turn out to be scams. Just look at the disaster that was BitConnect. So being listed isn't a guarantee of safety. But not being listed, that tells you the project couldn't even clear the lowest bar. And that's a huge warning.
And that leads us right to our 5th and final red flag. Now, this one's a little more technical, but stick with me, because it's so important. It really gets to the core of what crypto is all about.
And that issue is centralization. See, the whole point of crypto, the big revolutionary idea behind something like Bitcoin, is that it's decentralized. No one person, no single company is in charge. So when you come across a project that is centralized, you're basically throwing that whole idea out the window and putting all of your trust and all of your money into the hands of just one person or company.
And that is a huge risk. Why? Because in a centralized system, that one person or that small group can do whatever they want. They can change the rules whenever they feel like it, they can freeze your account, or they can literally just take the money and disappear. They have all the power, and you have zero. It's the complete opposite of the crypto dream.
So, okay, we've gone through the 5 biggest red flags. But when you boil it all down, what's the key takeaway? It's you. Your best defense isn't some fancy app. It's your own brain, your own curiosity, and just being willing to do a little bit of homework before you throw any money at something.
So with that in mind, here's a little toolkit for you. Before you even dream of investing, track down a contact for the company and hit them with these 3 simple questions. Trust me, their answers, or maybe even more telling, their lack of an answer, will tell you everything. And here's the bottom line, plain and simple. A real company, A legit business will be happy to answer you. They've got nothing to hide. You should expect a clear answer pretty quickly. And you have to remember this. Getting no response is an answer. Getting a vague, confusing response is an answer. And both of those answers are telling you the exact same thing. Stay away.
So I want to leave you with this one thought. The crypto space moves so fast, it's dizzying. It is so easy to get swept up in the hype and that fear of missing out. But just taking a moment, one single moment, to pause and ask the right questions, that's not just being smart. That one moment could literally be the difference between a great investment and losing everything. So before you click that invest button, just ask yourself, have I really looked into this? Stay curious, stay skeptical, and most importantly, stay safe out there.
All right, today we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the oldest and dirtiest tricks in the crypto playbook, the pump and dump. We're going to get right into the anatomy of this scam, how it works, who's getting rich, and more importantly, who's getting wrecked. So, if you've spent any time at all in crypto forums or on social media, you've definitely seen this. You know, that random post, that hyped up video, all promising that some tiny unknown coin is about to just explode. It's going to the moon. Well, what they don't tell you is that that rocket is often built to blow up on the launch pad. Okay, let's be crystal clear on what we're talking about here. A pump and dump isn't just a risky bet. This is textbook securities fraud. It is 100% illegal. The whole point is to artificially inflate a price, create a bubble out of nothing, just so a small group of insiders can cash out at the top. And it's always at the expense of everyone else who bought into the hype. So who's actually running this show? Well, this isn't some random market event. Oh no, it's a carefully staged performance, and there are very specific roles for everyone involved. Think of it like this. On one side, you have the performers. These are the insiders, the scammers, who are orchestrating the entire thing. And on the other side, you have the audience. That's the regular retail investors, people like you and me who get lured in by all the excitement. And here's the kicker. Both groups are hoping to make a profit, sure, but only one group actually knows when the show is going to end. So let's get into Act 1 of this little play, the pump. This is where the magic trick happens, creating a massive frenzy, literally out of thin air. And the playbook for this is surprisingly simple. First, the performers go out and quietly buy up a massive amount of some cheap, obscure coin that nobody's ever heard of. Then the promotion blitz begins. They unleash an army of fake accounts on social media, all talking about how amazing this coin is. Then they bring in the big guns, paid influencers who give it a stamp of approval. All this fake hype creates very real buying from the public, and that's what sends the price absolutely soaring. And we need to pause on this influencer part for a second. When a promoter hypes up a coin but doesn't tell you they were paid to do it, that's not just shady or unethical, that is an illegal act. They are literally passing off a paid advertisement as their genuine financial advice, and that is a huge betrayal of trust. But here's the thing about a pump. It can't last forever, and once that price hits its peak, Act 2 begins, and that is the brutal, inevitable dump. So, picture this. The hype is at a fever pitch. FOMO is off the charts. Everyone is scrambling to buy in, thinking they've found the next big thing. And right at that moment, the performers, the people who started it all, they start selling. And wow, this chart just says it all, doesn't it? The price doesn't just dip a little. It utterly collapses. All of that value that was created out of thin air just vanishes because the scammers are flooding the market with their cheap coins, leaving everybody else holding bags that are suddenly worthless. And get this, the really experienced scammers, they're not just slamming one giant sell button. No, they're way more cunning than that. They'll slowly bleed out their holdings, selling off chunks over hours, or maybe even days. Why? Because it keeps the price from crashing instantly, letting them squeeze out every last drop of profit before the real panic begins. It's just incredibly calculated. As the price starts to nosedive, the audience finally realizes they've been had. That's when the panic selling kicks in. Everyone rushes for the exits at the same time, trying to salvage anything they can, and that stampede is what drives the price straight down to zero, locking in catastrophic losses for pretty much everyone who arrived late to the party. So after hearing all that, the big question is, how do you avoid becoming the audience in this tragedy? Well, the good news is there are usually some pretty clear warning signs, these giant red flags you can look out for. you've got to keep your eyes peeled for stuff like this, like a sudden storm of hype from accounts you've never heard of, all posting at the same time. Or maybe an influencer who usually talks about fitness or gaming suddenly becomes a crypto expert overnight. If you look at the project and there's no real tech, no real utility, just a bunch of buzzwords, be careful. And of course, the classic high-pressure tactic, buy now, you're gonna miss out. These are all signals that you're being played. Now, this brings us to a really interesting and kind of tempting question. If you know how this scam works, could you, play along and win? I mean, you've thought about it, right? It's a tempting idea. If you're smart enough to spot the pump as it's happening, why not just jump in, ride that wave up, and just be smart enough to sell before the insiders do? Get a piece of the action. Okay, let's break down that temptation versus the cold, hard reality. You see the promise of quick, easy money, but the reality is you could lose every penny in the blink of an eye. You might tell yourself, hey, it's just trading. But the reality is you're willingly participating in a criminal scheme, and that could mean massive fines or even jail time. And here's the most important part. You can't trust the scammers. They have zero loyalty. They might tell the group they're dumping at $5, but start selling secretly at $4, leaving you and everyone else completely trapped. And what happens after the dump is complete? Poof, the performers are gone. They scrub their websites, they delete their social media profiles. Every shred of evidence that the scheme ever existed just vanishes into thin air. They take the money and just disappear. In the end, it really all comes down to this single, powerful quote from our source. Even if you somehow manage to time it perfectly and walk away with a profit, it's a zero-sum game. Your winnings came directly out of the pockets of the people who lost. So the real question isn't just, can you win this game? It's, should you even be playing it at all? In the world of crypto, most projects try to be the absolute best at just one thing. But what if a project tried to be the best at, everything? Today, we're looking at Komodo, a platform so versatile, people call it the Swiss Army knife of the blockchain world. So let's open this thing up and see what's inside. And honestly, that Swiss Army knife analogy is pretty much perfect. See, Komodo isn't just a single coin or one specific tool. It's a whole ecosystem, an entire end-to-end solution that's packed with different features, whether you're a developer, a trader, or just a regular user. So if it's a Swiss Army knife, what are the actual tools inside? Well, the platform's capabilities really boil down to three main areas. You can build, you can trade, and you can transact. Let's take a quick look at each one. It really is that simple. Komodo's whole offering fits into these three functions. If you're a developer, it's a platform to build on. If you're a trader, it's a decentralized exchange to trade on. And for everyone else, it's a secure way to transact. It's a really clean, three-pronged approach. Okay, first up, for all the builders out there, Komodo has something called the Antara framework, which is basically a powerful toolkit for creating your very own custom blockchains. Developers can just pick and choose the features they want, build out dApps or games, and even launch their own ICOs without having to reinvent the wheel every time. It's all about making a super complex process a whole lot simpler. Next up, for the traders, we've got the Atomic DEX. Now, it's a decentralized exchange, sure, but its killer feature is its mind-boggling compatibility. It uses a cool piece of tech called atomic swaps to bridge the gap between totally different blockchains, like ones based on Bitcoin and ones based on Ethereum. And the result? Get this. It can technically support 99% of all cryptocurrencies in existence. That's a massive claim. And finally, transacting. Komodo offers a really unique privacy feature called Jumpler. What's so unique about it is that it's opt-in. It uses some seriously powerful zero-knowledge proof technology. We're talking the same kind of stuff Zcash uses to make transactions anonymous. So you get to decide, send a normal, transparent transaction, or, just flip a switch and make it completely private. So we've seen the tools in the knife. Pretty cool, right? But what holds it all together? This brings us to Komodo's secret sauce, maybe the most innovative part of its entire design, how it keeps itself so secure. And this gets at a fundamental problem in crypto. I mean, think about it. If you're a new, smaller blockchain, your network just doesn't have the same muscle as Bitcoin, which makes you a way easier target for hackers. So how do you protect yourself without a billion-dollar mining operation behind you?
Well, Komodo's answer is this incredibly clever mechanism called delayed proof of work, or DPoW for short. The idea is, instead of trying to compete with Bitcoin's monster security, Komodo found a way to just borrow it. It effectively recycles Bitcoin's hash rate, that's the network's total computing power, to shield itself. So here's how it actually works. Komodo has these 64 special notary nodes. About every 10 minutes, these nodes take a snapshot of the Komodo blockchain's history, and then they literally embed that record onto the Bitcoin blockchain. So for a hacker to attack Komodo, they wouldn't just have to break the Komodo chain, they'd also have to break the fortress that is the Bitcoin chain. It's like putting your valuables in a small, fast lockbox, and then putting that lockbox inside Fort Knox. It's a way to get Fort Knox security without building your own Fort Knox.
Okay, so that's the tech, which is pretty mind-blowing. But what about the actual cryptocurrency that makes this whole ecosystem go round? Let's zoom in on the KMD coin, check out its history, and the people behind it.
So here's the quick rundown on KMD. It's the platform's native currency, and it has this neat feature. If you hold more than 10 KMD in your wallet, you earn about 5% interest per year just for being an active user. It's actually a fork of Zcash, which itself is a fork of Bitcoin, so it has a pretty solid lineage. And the team is almost 30 people strong, and these guys are busy. Based on their coding activity, they rank 30th among all crypto projects out there, which is seriously impressive.
And oh man, the price has been on an absolute roller coaster. It started at just 10 cents back in its ICO in early 2017. By the peak of that crazy bull run later in the year, it had shot up to over $13. And yeah, while it's come down from that peak, it's worth pointing out that it's still above its initial ICO price, which is something a lot of projects from that era definitely can't say.
To really put that run into perspective, we're talking about a potential return of 118 times. That means if you put $100 in at the all-time low, it could have turned into over $11,000 at the all-time high. Just an absolutely incredible performance. So Komodo's got the impressive tech, it's got an active team, and a history of explosive performance. But what does the future hold? This really brings us to its biggest challenge and its ultimate strategic trade-off. And this is Komodo's core dilemma. On one side, you have its all-in-one Swiss Army knife approach, bundling a DEX, privacy tools, and developer frameworks all together. But on the other side, you've got most of its competitors taking a laser-focused approach, trying to be the absolute best at just one thing, like being the best privacy coin or the best platform for developers. And that really leaves us with the final critical question, not just for Komodo, but for the whole crypto market. As this space gets more and more mature, which strategy is going to win out? Is it better to be a master of one specific trade or the super versatile jack of all? Only time is going to tell. All right, let's dive in. Today, we're taking a look at a cryptocurrency that's built around two really fascinating ideas: total digital privacy and, well, the chance for some pretty staggering profit. It's called Deep Onion, and its story is one you're definitely going to want to hear. So let's just start with a wild question. What if you could take a simple $100 bill and turn it into more than $16,000? I know it sounds like something out of a movie, but for Deep Onion, it was a very real possibility. Stick with me and I'll show you exactly how that was even possible. But before we get to the money, we've got to understand the why. Because behind that incredible number is a project that's tackling one of the biggest issues in our digital lives: the search for real, genuine anonymity online. So what exactly is Deep Onion? Well, at its heart, it's an anonymous cryptocurrency. But the real game changer here is its deep integration with the Tor network. And if you're not familiar, Tor, the Onion router, is basically the gold standard for anonymous communication. Deep Onion bakes that tech right into its very foundation. And hey, don't just take my word for it. Here's a look at the source material itself. It states the goal pretty clearly: to create an untraceable payment platform that protects a user's privacy, security, and identity. See, this isn't just another coin. It's a purpose-built tool for financial privacy. So let's really break that mission down. Every single one of these points is about shielding you, the user. We're talking about untraceable payments, a protected identity, and a network that's basically invisible. It's a complete 360-degree approach to keeping your finances private. Okay, so that's the mission. But how in the world do they actually pull all this off? Well, the secret is in its pretty unique mix of technologies that all work together to create this, fortress of privacy. So let's take a quick peek under the hood. We already talked about the Tor integration, which is absolutely crucial for hiding your location. But debunking also uses a hybrid system, combining proof of stake with a special proof of work algorithm called X13. This blend not only keeps the network secure, but also makes transactions way harder to trace. Then you add their custom deep send tech, which is another layer of mixing things up, and you've got this whole ecosystem designed to protect you.
And what does all that tech get you in the end? It's actually a really simple promise. You can send and receive funds privately, quickly, and securely, without worrying about who might be watching. It's all about taking back control over your own financial data.
All right, so we've covered the why behind the project and the how behind the technology. Now, let's get back to that jaw-dropping number we started with, because the investment story of debunking is just as impressive as its tech.
163x. Just let that number sink in for a second. That was the potential return on an investment if you bought at the absolute bottom and sold at the peak. A truly mind-blowing figure. And just to put that 163x into real-world numbers, our source material says it best. You could have potentially made $16,300 on a $100 investment, $100 becoming over 16 grand. That's the kind of volatility that gets people so excited about crypto in the first place. So how did that even happen? Well, the journey was pretty wild. The coin started out at just 11 cents, and at its peak, it soared to almost $18. That incredible climb is exactly what created that 163x opportunity.
Now, obviously, this has been a super quick flyby, but if this has piqued your interest and you want to dig in a little deeper, the project has plenty of resources out there to help you understand the tech, the team, and where it might be headed.
The source document actually points to the CoinMarketCap page as a great starting point for all things debunking. From there, you can dive into the source code, check out all the historical price charts. You can really get into the weeds and do your own research. It's the perfect place to start.
And that really brings us to the big picture here. You see, debunking is more than just a cryptocurrency. It's a statement. It's a statement about how important privacy really is in our increasingly digital world. So I'll leave you with this to think about. In a world where our data is the new currency, what's the real price of privacy? Thanks for tuning in. All right, today we're diving into a really interesting crypto story. It's about a coin you might not have even heard of, but one that posted some absolutely wild returns. We're talking about Solaris. Okay, let's just get right to the crazy part. Imagine taking $100, about what you'd spend on a decent night out, and watching it turn into more than $13,000. Sounds impossible, right? But that's the kind of roller coaster that gets people so hooked on crypto. And today, we're going to figure out exactly how that happened. So what exactly is this crypto that just went to the moon? Let's get into the basics of what makes Solaris tick.
Okay, so at its core, Solaris is all about two big ideas you hear a lot in crypto: decentralization and fair distribution. What does that really mean? Well, simply put, no bank or central authority is in charge, and it was set up from the get-go to be spread out pretty widely among the people actually using it.
All right, let's peek under the hood at the tech. So Solaris runs on something called the NIST-5 algorithm, and it uses a proof-of-work system. Now, if you've ever heard anything about Bitcoin, you've probably heard of proof-of-work. It's basically the system where miners use a ton of computing power to crack these really hard digital puzzles. When they solve one, it verifies a bunch of transactions, locks them into the blockchain, and bam, new coins are created as a reward. These are the building blocks holding the whole thing together. Okay, so we've got the techie principles down. But what does all that stuff actually do for someone who wants to use it? Let's talk about the features that really matter. First up, and this is a big one, is security. The whole network is built to keep transactions safe. And right alongside that is privacy. Anonymity is a huge part of its design, which means your personal identity isn't tied to your transactions. So, for you, the user, what's the experience like? It really boils down to three simple things. 1, you can send and receive coins anywhere in the world. 2, you get to stay private. And 3, and this is a really big deal, you pay almost nothing in fees. And you might be wondering, how are those fees so low? Well, there's a really interesting reason why. The source material puts it perfectly. The miners, the people processing all the transactions, they don't actually charge you a fee. Instead, the network itself pays them. It's a pretty unique way of doing things, and it's one of the things that made Solaris stand out.
Okay, let's get back to that number I mentioned at the start, the one that probably got your attention. We've covered the what of Solaris, so now it's time for the wow, the performance history that makes this such a crazy story. I mean, just look at this journey. The data really tells the whole story here. Solaris started out trading for just about 37 cents, but at its absolute peak, it hit almost $49 a coin. Think about that for a second. From cents to nearly 50 bucks. That is one heck of a climb. So when you do the math on that trip from the bottom to the very top, you get our magic number, 132x. That's the multiplier. We're talking a 132 times return on your investment, assuming you had the perfect timing to buy at the absolute low and sell at the absolute high. It's that kind of insane number that really captures the whole high-risk, high-reward nature of the crypto world, isn't it? So let's make that 132x feel a little more real. If you had put in just $100 at that all-time low and managed to sell at the all-time high, you would have walked away with $13,200. It's just a perfect, if extreme, example of the sheer volatility and, yeah, the massive potential of these digital currencies. So that's the quick and dirty on the Solaris story. If you're curious and want to dig into the charts and the historical data for yourself, CoinMarketCap is a great place to start. All the info is right there. So when you put it all together, Solaris is a really fascinating case study, right? You've got these unique features on one hand and this absolutely explosive market performance on the other. And it kind of leaves you with this big question. Did it skyrocket because of its tech, the privacy and the low fees? Or was it just about pure market hype and being in the right place at the right time? That 132x number really makes you think, what is it that truly gives a cryptocurrency its value? Something to chew on. All right, today we're diving into a cryptocurrency called Sumo Coin. And its story? Wow. It's a huge reminder of just how explosive the world of privacy coins can be. And it all kicks off with one simple number. So let's just start with a quick thought experiment, okay? Imagine you're placing a small bet, just a little flyer on some new digital asset. Let's say you put in just $100. Not a life-changing amount, right? Not gonna break the bank, but hey, it's enough to get you in the game, to be part of the ride. Okay, now, what if that $100, just that 100, somehow over time balloons into $27,500? I know, it sounds like a fantasy, right? But this is exactly the kind of wild potential we are talking about today. I mean, that's a 275x return on your money. And believe it or not, this incredible scenario, well, it was the potential reality for folks who got in early on the coin we're about to break down, all based on our source material. So what is this cryptocurrency? What's the deal with this thing that held so much promise? Let's get right into it and take a closer look at Sumo Coin. And hey, just a quick heads up before we really dive in. Everything we're going to cover today comes straight from our source material. We want to give you the clearest possible picture of Sumo Coin's story, just the facts. All right, so Sumo Coin, which trades under the ticker SUMO, first popped up back in May of 2017. Now, it's interesting. It wasn't built from the ground up. It was what we call a fork of another, probably more famous, privacy coin, Monero. Think of it like a spin-off, taking the original's DNA and then going its own way. And this right here, this is where things get really cool. See, Sumo Coin is built on something called the crypto note protocol. Now, to make that simple, think about Bitcoin's blockchain, right? It's kind of like a public park. Everyone can see that someone is meeting someone else, even if you don't know their real names. But crypto note, that's more like a super exclusive private club with like secret tunnels. It was designed from its very core to make sure the sender, the receiver, and the amount of every single transaction stays completely anonymous. So yeah, this whole obsession with privacy is really what made Sumo Coin, well, Sumo Coin. Let's dig into what that actually means in the real world. This quote from the source just nails it, doesn't it? It says it all. You have to remember, in a super crowded crypto market, Sumo Coin's whole reason for being was to put these three things first, and that really, really made it stand out back then. And here's what that mission really breaks down to. You've got security, to protect the network itself. Then there's privatization, which is all about shielding your identity. And finally, non-traceability, which makes it practically impossible to follow the money. I mean, this is the absolute core DNA of a privacy coin, and it was tapping right into this growing feeling that people wanted more financial anonymity in an increasingly digital world.
Okay, so that all sounds pretty great in theory. But you might be wondering, how did people actually get their hands on Sumo Coin? How did they use it? Well, the source lays out 3 pretty clear ways. First, you could mine it. And what was cool is that it was designed so anyone with a regular computer could do it, not just these huge mining farms. That was a big deal for its community. Second, you could store your coins in special wallets that worked on Windows, Mac, and Linux. And third, if you just wanted to trade it, it was listed on a few exchanges back in the day, like Cryptopia and Livecoin. All right, let's get back to it. That absolutely staggering number we started this whole thing with, the 275x. How in the world does a coin go from being basically unknown to offering that kind of potential return? Okay, so the journey our source lays out is, well, it's pretty remarkable. Get this, Sumo coins started trading at just 4 cents a coin. 4 cents. But at its absolute peak, it just skyrocketed to almost $11. That insane climb from the very bottom to the very top, that's where we get that potential 275 times gain. It's just a perfect example of the high-risk, high-reward game that is the crypto space. So if you're the kind of person who loves to get into the weeds and look at the raw data, the source points you to places like CoinMarketCap. You can go there and find pretty much everything. We're talking technical docs, the actual source code, and all the historical charts that track its entire journey. You know, when you look back, Sumo Coin is just this powerful case study, a real snapshot in time of the crazy, volatile, high-potential world of privacy coins. And it really leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? In a world where we're all still trying to figure out digital privacy, what's going to be the next 275x story? You know, in the crypto world, real privacy is kind of the holy grail. Today, we're going to dive into the absolutely wild story of a project that basically had to die to be reborn. I'm talking about Firo. Let's get into it. So, this is the big question, right? How do you actually make your crypto transactions untraceable? A lot of people think Bitcoin is anonymous, but nope, it's pseudonymous. Every single transaction is right there on a public ledger for anyone to see. So how do you break that chain? That is the exact puzzle that privacy coins like Firo are trying to solve. And this is Firo. Now, it actually started its life as a project called Zcoin, and it had this one really ambitious goal: to create true financial privacy. But as you're about to see, the road to get there was, well, it was anything but a straight line. All right, so to really get where Firo is today, we've got to go back to the beginning. We have to talk about its first attempt, which, let's be honest, was pretty flawed. It was called the Zero Coin Protocol. Now, this was a really unique take on privacy. And what's wild is that it was originally designed to be an upgrade for Bitcoin itself. Okay, so the easiest way to wrap your head around this is to think of it like a coin laundry. Basically, you'd take your coins, the dirty ones, right, the ones with the transaction history, and you'd essentially burn them. Poof, gone. And in their place, the protocol would let you mint brand new, squeaky clean coins with zero history. A totally fresh start. But, and this is a huge but, the system had a major catch. It relied on what's called a trusted setup. See, to kick the whole thing off, a secret key was generated that had to be destroyed. Why? Because if it wasn't destroyed, whoever had that key could just secretly print infinite coins for themselves. I mean, it required total trust in a world that's built on the exact opposite idea. Don't trust, verify. And it gets worse. On top of the trusted setup issue, the Zero Coin Protocol had some really critical vulnerabilities. We're talking serious security holes. And not just once, but twice. Once in 2017 and then again in 2019, attackers found these flaws and managed to create forged coins, literally out of thin air. And look, this wasn't some small bug. These forgeries added up to over 1% of the entire circulating supply. For a project that's all about security and privacy, that's a nightmare. It was an absolutely devastating blow that basically forced the developers to scrap everything and go back to the drawing board. So, out of the ashes of that crisis, the project was reborn, and its new form was called the Sigma Protocol. This wasn't just a patch, it was a complete overhaul from the ground up, designed specifically to fix those fatal flaws using way more advanced cryptography. And Sigma really was a game changer. Let's break it down. The old Zero Coin Protocol, it needed that sketchy, trusted setup and was vulnerable to forgeries. The new Sigma Protocol? No trusted setup required, and it was secure and vetted. specifically designed to eliminate those forgery bugs that almost destroyed the whole project. This, right here, was the foundation for their comeback.
And the good news is it worked. Since it was launched back in 2019, the Sigma protocol has been running smoothly on Firo's mainnet. It brought back that much-needed stability and, just as importantly, started to restore people's confidence in the project's security.
But Firo's comeback story is about more than just privacy tech. The team didn't stop at fixing the old protocol. They also built out a really unique ecosystem to support the whole thing.
So here's how the network itself is run. Firo uses what's called a hybrid model. On one hand, it's proof of work, which means you can mine it with the GPU, just like other coins. But it also has a proof of stake element. If you lock up 1,000 Firo, you can run what they call a Z node. This is a special kind of node that helps secure the network, and in return, you get to earn rewards.
And we're not talking about small change here. The incentive to run a Z node is pretty significant. The approximate annual return for operators has been hovering around 15.3%. That's a pretty powerful reason for people to get involved and help secure the network, right? So when new coins are created, where do they go? Well, a full 30% of every single block reward goes straight to those Z-node operators we just talked about. The rest is split between the miners who do the proof of work and a founders fund that supports the project's ongoing development. Firo doesn't just stop at making transactions private. They add extra layers of anonymity on top of that. For instance, it integrates tools like Tor and something called the Dandelion protocol. What these do is basically hide your IP address, which makes it super difficult for anyone to even see who is connecting to the Firo network in the first place. Okay, so they've got all this cool tech in place. The big question now is, what does the future actually hold for Firo? Because like any project in crypto, it's got a really interesting mix of pros and cons, strengths, and some serious challenges ahead. All right, let's lay it all out. Firo's future really is a balancing act. On the plus side, you've got a super experienced team, some really unique technology, and they had a fair launch with no ICO or pre-mine. That's huge. But on the other side of the coin, this Sigma protocol is still pretty new. The privacy coin market is insanely saturated. You're competing with giants like Monero and Zcash. And yeah, its price has had a tough time getting its momentum back. And if you just look at the price chart, you can really see that story play out. I mean, back in the 2017 bull run, Firo, which was still Zcoin then, hit a peak of around $169. But its all-time low? A mere 40 cents. That's a huge swing. Just to put that in perspective for you, that's a potential gain of 320x from the absolute bottom to the absolute top. Think about it. A $100 investment at the lows could have turned into $32,000 at the peak. It just goes to show you the massive potential, but also, the massive risk involved. But, despite all those challenges, Firo's single biggest asset might just be its dev team. These guys are known for being really competent, super motivated, and just constantly shipping code at a wild pace. That kind of relentless dedication is an incredibly powerful engine for growth. So at the end of the day, Firo has truly been through the fire. It survived catastrophic failures and managed to rebuild itself with stronger, more secure tech. But the big question that's still hanging in the air is this. In a sea of privacy coins, is that hard-won resilience going to be enough to actually win? I guess only time will tell.
Welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we're talking about Aeon. Think about this, a crypto that promised all the privacy of a heavyweight like Monero, but in a package that, well, pretty much anyone could use. Let's dig into how they tried to pull that off.
So you know how it is in crypto, right? Real, solid privacy usually comes at a cost. It's slow, it's clunky, it eats up your computer's resources. So the huge question Aeon was trying to tackle was, hey, can we get that same rock-solid privacy, but make it zippy and light enough to run on, say, your phone?
And the best way to think about where this project came from is its nickname. People started calling it Monero's little brother.
Okay, so right out of the gate, its mission was super clear. I mean, you had Monero, which was already this absolute giant in the privacy coin world. Aeon's whole deal was to take that same powerful genetic code, that DNA, and wrap it up for a totally different audience, one that cared more about things being easy and accessible.
And this comparison, it just hits the nail on the head. Think of Monero as this big, heavy-duty industrial machine. It's incredibly powerful for sure, but man, it takes a lot to run it.
Aeon, on the other hand, was meant to be like that sleek, portable multi-tool. The kind of thing you can just whip out and use on your laptop or even your phone. But here's the thing. Lightweight can sometimes sound like weak, right? Not here. Aeon was built from the ground up with some serious privacy tech baked right in. The whole point was to make its transactions completely untraceable, by design.
So how did they do it? Well, the secret sauce is this really clever tech called ring signatures. Imagine this. Instead of your transaction being a single obvious blip on the radar, it gets tossed into a crowd of decoys. It's like trying to find one specific person in a masquerade ball. For anyone looking in from the outside, it's almost impossible to figure out where the transaction actually came from.
And the process is actually pretty straightforward when you break it down. So you start a transaction. Then the network grabs a bunch of other random transactions, these are the decoys, and mixes yours in with them. What comes out the other side is this cryptographic puzzle where your signature is just one of several possibilities. The trail just vanishes.
And that brings us to the most important word here, unlinkability. That's the whole game. By mixing your transaction with all this random data, it snaps the chain that could link you, the sender, to the person receiving it. The two ends of that transaction are, for all intents and purposes, completely disconnected.
Okay, so we've got the privacy part down, but let's circle back to that other key idea, lightweight. What does that really mean for an actual user, and why should you even care?
This is where Aeon really shined. See, it used an algorithm called Kryptonite. Now, the coolest thing about Kryptonite is that it was built to resist those big, expensive, specialized mining rigs. And what that meant was that pretty much anyone with a regular computer, a standard CPU or GPU, could jump in and help secure the network. It made things truly decentralized. We're talking about a network run by everyday users all over the world, not just a few giant mining companies.
So you have this accessible, privacy-focused tech, and, well, the market definitely took notice. Setting aside all the cool tech for a second, Aeon's financial journey is a story in itself. It's pretty wild.
Get this. When Aeon first hit the exchanges, it was trading for about 9/10 of 1 cent. Yeah, that's right, less than a penny. An unbelievably low place to start for a project with this much ambition.
But then, at its absolute peak, it rocketed up to nearly $9 a coin. I mean, think about that jump. It's just staggering.
So, if you do the math, from the bottom to the top, that's a potential 118x return. That number alone tells you everything you need to know about the kind of buzz and excitement this project whipped up. So just to put that into real-world terms, let's say you'd put just $100 in at the very bottom. If you timed it perfectly, that $100 could have turned into almost $12,000. It's a perfect example of just how high risk, but also high reward, these early crypto projects can be.
So, there you have it. That's the story of Aeon in a nutshell. Monero's little brother, powered by some really smart privacy tech that had an absolutely incredible ride on the market. Now, if this has got you curious and you want to dig in even more, we've got just the place for you.
If you're one of those people who loves to go down the rabbit hole, the source material for this explainer points to CoinMarketCap. It's pretty much your one-stop shop. You can find links to its website, you can check out the block explorers, even dig into the source code. All the charts, all the historical data, it's all there for you to do your own research.
And all of this kind of leaves us with a bigger question, doesn't it? Now, Aeon itself isn't really in active development anymore, but its story is super interesting as a case study. As more and more of our lives go digital, you have to ask, how important are these kinds of lightweight, easy-to-use privacy tools going to become? The need for that kind of thing, well, that's definitely not going anywhere. Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.
Ever come across a 230x return in crypto? I mean, that sounds made up, right? But it's not. It's the real story of Bitcoin. So in this explainer, we're going to dig right into the source material to see exactly how a coin focused on privacy pulled off such a mind-blowing increase. Let's jump in.
Yeah, you see that question and it definitely makes you do a double take. How on earth is that even possible? Well, the answer isn't just about random market hype. The real story is actually baked right into the coin's core technology and its economic design. And that's the how we're going to unpack today.
230 times. That's the staggering jump we're talking about from Bitcoin's absolute lowest price to its all-time high. But, to really get a number that big, you've got to look beyond the price charts and understand the fundamental idea that was driving all that interest in the first place. And that big idea? It all boils down to one powerful word: privacy. For Bitcoin, the goal wasn't just to be another coin to speculate on.
Nope, it was built on this core mission to create a truly anonymous way to transact online. So what is Bitcoin exactly? Well, the source itself defines it as a private, decentralized cryptocurrency with open source code. And every single one of those words is key. Private means your transactions are nobody's business but yours. Decentralized means no one person or company is in charge. And open source means anyone can look at the code to see how it works. Total transparency. And listen to this. The source material makes a really bold claim here. It calls Bitcoin the best solution. That's not just some throwaway marketing line. It was positioned as the ultimate answer to a problem that's only gotten bigger, the fact that we're losing our financial privacy in this super digital world. Okay, so that's a huge promise to make. But how does the tech actually deliver on that level of privacy and security? Let's get into the nuts and bolts of it. So on top of being private, decentralized, and open source, the source points out a couple more killer features. First, instant and completely untraceable transactions. The whole point was to make it impossible to connect the dots between who sent the money and who got it. And second, no extra fees. That's a big deal, removing a major headache you see in a lot of other financial systems. You know, the easiest way to get your head around this is to just think of it like digital cash. Seriously. If you hand someone a $20 bill, there's no public ledger tracking where that bill came from or where it's going next. Bitcoin was trying to build that exact same level of untraceability for the internet. All right, so we've got the tech side, which is all about privacy. Super important. But that's only half the story. The other half is the economic model, which was specifically engineered to create value. So the first piece of that economic puzzle is good old-fashioned scarcity. The source confirms there's a hard limit, a cap, of 184.47 billion Bitcoins. Just like with gold, there's only so much to go around. You can't just hit a button and print more, and that's a fundamental driver of value. And it gets even more clever. It's not just that the supply is fixed. The rate at which new coins are created also matters. New coins are released every 2 minutes, but, and this is the key part, that number gets smaller and smaller over time. It's basically designed to become rarer, which in theory makes every coin left that much more valuable. Okay, let's put it all together now. We've got this technology that promises total, untraceable privacy. And we've got an economic model built on increasing scarcity. So how did those two things combine to create that absolutely massive return we started with? And here's where the numbers really tell the tale. It went from an all-time low of a tiny, tiny fraction of a penny per coin to an all-time high of about 1.5 cents. Now, I know both of those numbers sound really small on their own, but the journey between them, that huge leap, that's where you find the 230x explosion. And hey, this isn't us just doing some creative math. The source material we're looking at lays it out perfectly clear. An investment made at that all-time low, if sold at the high, would have generated that 230x gain. This is the exact math behind our $100 to $23,000 example. It's right there in black and white.
So what's the big takeaway here? It really wasn't just one single thing. According to the source, it was this powerful 1-2 punch, a super compelling mission, real financial privacy, combined with a really clever economic design. That's what grabbed people's attention and, for a while at least, drove its value through the roof.
And all of this brings us to one final, really important question. As more and more of our lives go completely digital, the story of Bitcoin is a pretty powerful reminder to stop and ask ourselves, what's the ultimate price of privacy? It's a question the market is definitely still wrestling with. Something to think about, right? Thanks for diving into this with me. Okay, let's talk about something that's practically ancient in crypto terms. 2014. We're going to dive into a real veteran of the space, Navcoin. And it all started with a simple but really powerful question.
Yeah, what if Bitcoin was faster, cheaper, and more private? I mean, what if you could take everything that made Bitcoin revolutionary but just make it better? That's exactly what Navcoin set out to do way back when. So let's see how they tackled it.
So yeah, Navcoin is definitely not some new kid on the block. We're talking 2014. They literally took Bitcoin's own code, forked it, and started tinkering with some of its most important features to build something completely new. All right, so how did they actually do it? Let's get into the tech, because the changes they made were a really big deal. And right away, the difference in performance is just staggering. Look at this. Navcoin processes a new block of transactions every 20 seconds. Bitcoin?
10 minutes. That's a massive difference. And that incredible speed boost all comes down to one fundamental change, how it reaches consensus.
And that method is called proof of stake. So instead of the whole proof of work thing where miners burn tons of energy, with proof of stake, users just lock up their coins. They stake them to help keep the network secure and check transactions. And that one simple change, that's the secret sauce behind Navcoin's speed and efficiency. So what do you get from that? Well, the benefits are pretty obvious. You get faster transactions, you get way lower fees, and the whole network can handle more traffic without getting all clogged up. And they didn't stop there. The community even activated SegWit. That's a tech upgrade that makes things even more efficient, always pushing to make it better. But it wasn't just about speed, right? Privacy was also a huge piece of the puzzle. So Navcoin built this really clever opt-in privacy system. By default, everything's public, just like Bitcoin. But if you want privacy, you can choose to encrypt and mix up your transactions. And it does this using a whole separate parallel blockchain, a subchain they call NavTech. It's all about giving users that choice. Okay, so the tech is cool, but who's actually in charge? Who's steering the ship? This is where you really start to see what Navcoin is all about. And this is a really, really important point, especially today. Navcoin launched without any ICO or pre-mine for the founders. None of that stuff where the developers get a huge chunk of coins before anyone else. The whole idea was to make it as fair and decentralized as possible right from the get-go. Okay, but wait, if there's no pre-mine and no ICO, how does the project get funded? How do you pay for anything? Well, the answer is actually baked right into the blockchain itself. See, every single time a new block is created, a half a Navcoin is generated. So, where does that coin go? It goes straight into a community fund. And that adds up to about 500,000 NAV every single year, all of it dedicated to improving the project. Anyone can put up a proposal for funding, and the people who hold the coins get to vote. The network literally funds and governs itself. But, a model like this isn't perfect, and it comes with its own set of challenges. So to really get the full picture here, we have to talk about the real-world challenges that Navcoin is up against today. And this right here is a perfect example. The ideal, right, the dream, was this perfectly community-run, decentralized project. But the reality, when you actually look at the data on the blockchain, is a bit different. It turns out a pretty small group of wallets actually holds most of the coins. And that really makes you question, how decentralized is it, really? And it's not just about governance. There are some serious market hurdles, too. For one, most of the trading happens on just one exchange, and the volume is low. That means liquidity is thin, which can lead to this thing called slippage, where one big order can send the price swinging like crazy. You add that to the fact that not many third-party wallets support it, plus all of the stiff competition from newer, faster blockchains, and yeah, you can see it's a real uphill battle. So, when you put it all together, what's the takeaway? What's the legacy of this crypto veteran? Well, despite all the challenges we just talked about, Navcoin's history tells a story of just incredible potential. I mean, look at this number, 1,000x. That's not just a number on a chart. It's proof of the kind of insane growth that was possible for these early, innovative projects that had the guts to try and build something better than Bitcoin. So where does that 1,000x come from? Well, it represents the potential return if you bought at the all-time low, we're talking less than half a cent, and held it all the way to its all-time high of about $4. It's just a wild reminder of the high-risk, high-reward world these early projects were born into. Let's put that into perspective for a second. A simple $100 investment could have, in theory, turned into $100,000. It just perfectly captures that pioneering spirit and, let's be real, the speculative frenzy of that whole era in crypto history. And all of this really brings us to the big question for Navcoin today. You have this project that was forged in a totally different era. It was all about community, a fair launch, and solid tech. But now, it's in a super crowded market with all these newer, faster competitors. So can a community-driven veteran like Navcoin still stand out? The answer to that question is really going to define its future.
All right, today we're going to talk about a really interesting crypto contender called PIVs. We'll get into its tech, the community behind it, and yeah, that incredible investment story. All based on the research we've been digging into. So let's jump right in.
Okay, so first things first. What's PIVX? What does it even mean? Well, it's actually an acronym for Private Instant Verified Transaction. And right there, in the name itself, you kind of get the whole mission, right? Privacy, speed, and security. Those are the three big pillars, and they really set the stage for everything else we're about to cover.
But here's a little twist in the story that I think is pretty cool. Before it was ever called PIVX, it actually went by the name Darknet. Then, back in January 2017, it went through this total rebrand. And that was a huge turning point, you know? It's what really kicked off its transformation from this kind of obscure project into a real rising star.
Okay, so let's get properly introduced to PIVX. What are the core vitals? Let's take a look. So on the technical side, you're looking at a really fast 60-second block time. And the total supply? Capped at 43 million coins. But what's interesting is it's not just about the numbers. The analysis we looked at points out its unique marketing strategy and a really sharp, excellent-looking website. So right from the get-go, you can see PIVX was focused on two things: solid tech and making a great first impression.
All right, let's pop the hood and see what's powering this thing. What's super interesting about PIVX is that it wasn't built from the ground up. The research actually calls it a fascinating hybrid technology. It basically borrows key pieces from some of the biggest, most established names out there. And that's a pretty smart move, right? Why reinvent the wheel? It's like standing on the shoulders of giants, taking proven, battle-tested code to build something new and powerful.
And you can see that DNA laid out pretty clearly here. PIVX is a direct fork of Dash, which means its starting point was Dash's code. But it didn't stop there. It also pulled in some core fundamental elements from the OG blueprint itself, Bitcoin Core. Then it runs on an algorithm called Quark, and it secures everything with something called Proof of Stake 2.0. So it's this unique mashup of proven successful parts that really defines what it is.
Okay, so we have this solid technical base, but what does that actually let PIVX do? What are its superpowers? Let's check out the features that were built on top of this foundation to really make it stand out. Well, for starters, it's got some pretty advanced security stuff, like multi-signature access control and an escrow system. Plus, it has these super fast, swift transactions. We'll circle back to those in just a second. But the real game changer, the feature that made people sit up and take notice, was the built-in encrypted wallet chat. I mean, think about it. According to the research, no other privacy coin had managed to pull that off at the time. That's a huge deal.
And speaking of those swift transactions, this really shows you the difference. With a standard Bitcoin transaction, you know how it is. You've got to wait around for multiple confirmations on the network. But with PIVX, a swift transaction is confirmed in seconds. Just like that. And this speed is guaranteed by the network's masternodes, which are basically these powerful servers that lock in the transactions. The result is just dramatically faster.
You know, having great tech is one thing, but in the crypto world, that's really only half the story. The analysis we're breaking down here puts a huge emphasis on the people, the human element. It actually calls the community a vital ingredient for any project that wants to succeed.
And from everything we can see, the PIVX community is absolutely thriving. You've got a strong presence on multiple forums, a YouTube channel, a Twitter account. They're everywhere. But what's more important than just being there is that the community is described as being genuinely constructive. You know, full of active, helpful people who are actually engaged.
And this quote right here, it just says it all, doesn't it? If you have any questions, you can get a quick reply. The way they reply always makes sense. See, it's one thing to have a bunch of people in a forum, but it's a completely different thing to have a community that gives you quick, high-quality answers that are actually helpful. In fact, the research goes so far as to say you should probably stay away from projects that don't have that kind of support. That's how important it is.
So you've got strong tech, you've got this amazing community behind it. What does that all add up to in the market? Well, now we get to the part of the story that, let's be honest, gets everyone's attention. The absolutely mind-blowing investment payoff. So let's trace this price journey. Back in January 2017, right around that rebrand we talked about, you could pick up PIVX for just 10 cents. 10 cents a coin. And from that tiny starting point, it just went on this massive, epic run, all the way up to an all-time high of nearly $13. So what does that kind of growth look like? 130x. 130 times potential gain. I mean, for anyone who got in early and held on through that peak, the returns were just astronomical. There's no other word for it.
And just to put the 130x number in perspective, because it's kind of hard to wrap your head around, let's use the simple example from the research.
Imagine you put in just $100, a modest $100 investment. That could have turned into $13,000. It's just a wild example of the kind of explosive returns that are possible in this space.
And all of this kind of brings us to a final big question, doesn't it? When you look at the story of Pivx, with its smart, hybrid tech and its super passionate community, it really makes you wonder. In this crazy world of crypto, what's actually more important for the long haul? Is it the perfectly written code, or is it the community, the people who rally behind it and bring that code to life? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.
All right, today we're jumping into the story of Dash. Now, if you've been in crypto for a while, you've definitely heard of it. I mean, this coin is a true OG, born way back in 2014. In crypto years, that's like ancient history, right? It's an absolute veteran in a world where projects basically pop up and disappear overnight. But that brings us to the big mystery, the whole reason we're talking about this. Dash is one of the oldest projects out there, and it's got thousands of actual real-world merchants using it. So why is it falling behind? How can a coin that's been so successful, with so much adoption, be tumbling down the rankings? It just doesn't add up, does it? That's the puzzle we're going to piece together.
So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the big problem Dash is facing as one of the original coins. Then, we'll rewind and see what made it so popular in the first place. After that, we've got to talk about the two massive hurdles that have been holding it back, the privacy issue and the payments problem. And stick around, because at the end, we'll uncover the really clever pivot Dash is making to carve out a new future for itself. Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, the OG Coins Dilemma. You know, to really get what's going on with Dash, you have to remember just how long this project has been in the game. It launched in January 2014. The crypto world back then, totally different universe. And you know what? For a long time, Dash was royalty. At its peak, it was a top 5 crypto by market cap, right up there with the big dogs. But, well, the crypto space is just brutal. The competition is nonstop, and that top-tier status has slipped a lot. And that's the core problem they've had to face head-on. So, how did Dash get to be a top 5 coin to begin with? What was the secret sauce? Let's jump into Section 2 and see how Dash's whole mission was basically to become a better, more usable version of Bitcoin. I mean, the name says it all, right? Dash stands for digital cash.
And this is where Dash really shone, especially back in the day. I mean, just look at the difference here. It was built to be what Bitcoin kind of couldn't be, a coin for your daily coffee. We're talking 56 transactions a second versus Bitcoin's slow crawl at 7. Your payment's confirmed in less than 2 seconds, not the 10 or even 60 minutes you might wait for Bitcoin. And the fees? Oh my gosh, less than a penny. Compare that to $1 or more for Bitcoin. It was a no-brainer for actual everyday payments. And this wasn't just a cool tech demo. This technical edge led to real-world use. Over 5,000 merchants all over the world said, yeah, we'll take Dash. This was actual adoption happening in physical stores and online.
It also got a foothold in the physical world. With more than 2,000 Dash ATMs out there, it became way more accessible than a lot of other cryptos, really helping to bridge that gap between your digital wallet and cold hard cash. But honestly, nowhere was its impact bigger than in Latin America, especially in Venezuela. Think about it. You're facing insane hyperinflation. Your country's money is becoming worthless by the hour. And then, here comes Dash. For thousands of people, it became a stable alternative. With over 2,500 merchants in Venezuela alone accepting it, Dash stopped being a tech experiment and became a genuine economic lifeline. But the success story hit a massive wall, and that brings us to Section 3, the privacy problem. This is a perfect example of how a decision you make early on can come back to bite you years later, creating a total regulatory nightmare, all based on a misunderstanding. It really all comes down to the name. So it started as Xcoin, but then for a little while it was called Dark Coin. And that name, it's stuck in people's heads. Even though they rebranded pretty quickly in 2015 to the much friendlier Dash, that dark association just created this lasting and really damaging perception. And here's the proof of just how damaging that was. Look at this. As recently as 2020, the US Department of Justice was lumping Dash in with actual privacy coins like Monero, basically saying that using it looked suspicious. This kind of perception led to exchanges delisting it, intense scrutiny from regulators. It created huge problems for growth. But here's the crazy part. The reality completely flies in the face of that perception.
The actual data shows that Dash's privacy feature, the one called Private Send, is hardly ever used. I mean, look at that. A whopping 99.3% of all transactions are just regular, transparent ones. The very thing causing all the regulatory headaches, it accounts for less than 1% of what's happening on the network. So, and this is the key thing to understand. Private Send isn't some super secret, untraceable tech that only Dash has. It's just their version of something called CoinJoin, which is a method for mixing transactions that's also available for Bitcoin. Unlike a true privacy coin like Monero, privacy isn't baked into the Dash blockchain itself, it's just an optional feature. And that has been the Dash team's core argument to regulators this whole time. Okay, so even if you set aside that whole privacy mess, Dash was up against another, maybe even bigger, challenge. Let's get into Section 4, the payments problem. Because while Dash was busy fighting off regulators, the entire world of digital payments just exploded with new competition.
Just check out this chart for a second. Yeah, Dash's 56 transactions per second was amazing compared to Bitcoin. But it gets absolutely dwarfed by the old-school system Visa, and especially by new crypto rivals like Solana, which can handle a mind-blowing 65,000 transactions per second. All of a sudden, Dash's main selling point, its speed, wasn't so special anymore.
And the competition was coming from everywhere. You had new tech on Ethereum called Layer 2s that got way faster. People also started realizing they'd rather pay for stuff with stablecoins that are pegged to the dollar, so they didn't have to worry about the price of their crypto swinging up and down. And then you have these huge companies like Binance just taking over the crypto debit card market, a space Dash was really hoping to win. So Dash was basically trapped. It was getting hammered by regulators for a privacy feature nobody was using, and it was getting outpaced by faster competitors in the payments world. So what do? Well, that brings us to our final section, a third path forward. This is all about Dash's really interesting strategic pivot to survive. This quote just nails the dilemma they were in. If they leaned into the whole privacy thing, they'd get shut down by regulators. But if they focused only on payments, they'd just get crushed by the bigger, faster competition. They were stuck between a rock and a hard place. So what was the move? They chose a third option. Instead of fighting a losing battle on two different fronts, the Dash team decided, hey, let's build something new. Let's create our own territory where we can make the rules. And that solution is the Dash platform. So what is the Dash platform? Think of it like a whole new layer built on top of the original network. It's got four main pieces: a decentralized API so developers can build on it, something called Dash Drive for decentralized cloud storage, a name service so you can have a simple username instead of a crazy long wallet address, and the big one, a protocol that allows for smart contracts, kind of like Ethereum. And their strategy for rolling this out is pretty brilliant too. Instead of trying to be everything to everyone all at once, they're taking a page right out of Visa's history book. They're going to focus like a laser on the market where they're already strong, Latin America, nail it there, get real traction, and prove that it works before they even think about expanding globally. Which leaves us with the big final question. Dash was a pioneer, right? But it got pushed to the edge by a case of mistaken identity and just ferocious competition. So, by refusing to give up and instead pivoting to build its own unique ecosystem, can this OG coin actually pull off one of the greatest comebacks the crypto world has ever seen? I guess only time will tell. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into Zcash, a cryptocurrency that forces us to ask a really important question. Is your digital money actually as private as you think it is? You know, when most of us hear the word cryptocurrency, we immediately think anonymous. But what if I told you that for the most popular crypto in the world, every single transaction is basically a public record? Well, that's a surprising reality we're going to unpack today. So yeah, Bitcoin operates on what you could almost call a public secret. Its blockchain is like an open book. I mean, every transaction, who sent what and to whom, it's all out there for anyone in the world to see if they know where to look. And this right here, this comparison, it just cuts right to the heart of the issue. On the one side, you've got the complete transparency of a Bitcoin transaction. And on the other, you have a totally private alternative where all those crucial details are completely shielded. This is the exact problem that Zcash was built to solve.
So this is where Zcash enters the picture. It was created back in 2016 as a kind of offshoot of Bitcoin, but it was designed with one very clear goal in mind: to offer a private and what's called a fungible cryptocurrency. And fungible is just a fancy way of saying that every coin is interchangeable with no history attached to it, kind of like how $1 bill is the same as any other dollar bill.
And listen, this isn't some fringe idea. Zcash has caught the attention of some very famous supporters who really believe in its mission. As Edward Snowden puts it, privacy isn't just some nice-to-have feature. He argues that for a currency to be truly safe, it absolutely has to be private.
Now, what's so interesting about Zcash is that it doesn't actually force you to be private. It gives you a choice. You can make a totally public transaction, just like you would with Bitcoin, or you can decide to flip a switch and go completely dark, completely private.
So how do you make that choice? Well, it all comes down to two different kinds of addresses. You've got your transparent T address, which works pretty much exactly like Bitcoin, and then you have the shielded Z address, and that's the one that keeps all your transaction details totally anonymous on the network.
Okay, so how on earth does Zcash pull this off? I mean, how can you prove a transaction is legitimate without revealing any of the key details? It sounds like magic, right? Well, the answer lies in some pretty incredible technology that makes it all possible. All right, the tech behind all this privacy is called ZK Snarks. Yeah, I know, it's a mouthful, but the idea itself is revolutionary. It's a way to use cryptography to prove you have certain information, like you have the funds to make a payment, without ever showing what that information is. The network can confirm the transaction is valid, but it never sees the sender, the receiver, or the amount. It's wild.
Let me give you a super simple way to think about it. Imagine there's a door, and it only opens with a secret password. Now, I can prove to you that I know that password by just walking through the door and coming out the other side. You're now 100% certain I know the password. But here's the thing. I never actually told you what it was. That, in a nutshell, is the magic of a zero-knowledge proof.
So, besides all the privacy stuff, what's really fascinating is that Zcash shares a ton of its DNA with Bitcoin. But if we pop the hood and take a look, you'll see there are some really important differences that make it unique.
Just take a look here. You can see they have a lot in common, same 21 million coin supply, same proof of work system, but the really big differences are in that hashing algorithm and, of course, the privacy model. Zcash gives you the option to be private, whereas Bitcoin is just public, period.
Another thing that really set it apart was how it got started. It didn't do a big initial coin offering. Instead, Zcash used something called a founder's reward. For the first 4 years, 10% of all the rewards from mining went straight to the founders, developers, and early investors. That's how they funded the project's development.
And unlike a lot of crypto projects where the developers are anonymous, Zcash has a very public-facing team. It's led by a cryptographer named Zuko Wilcox and the Electric Coin Company, which is a registered US company. That really adds a layer of accountability that you just don't see in a lot of the crypto world.
Plus, this isn't a project that's just sitting still. It has a solid history of consistent and important upgrades. The sapling upgrade back in 2018, that was an absolute game changer. It made private transactions way more efficient, faster, cheaper. It was a huge step toward making financial privacy a real practical option for everybody. Okay, so let's pull all of this together. What does this all really mean for the future of money? Let's zoom out a bit and talk about why Zcash's whole approach to privacy is such a big deal in the conversation about our digital future. The big takeaway here is that Zcash is way more than just a niche privacy coin. It's a project that's trying to strike this really delicate balance. By giving people both private and transparent options, it creates a way for regulators to be comfortable while still protecting our privacy. It's a real-world test of some amazing technology, and it's decentralized and available everywhere. For the people who really believe in this isn't just about cool tech. It's about a fundamental principle. They argue that as more and more of our lives, especially our finances, go online into this world of constant surveillance, we need tools that can protect our privacy more than ever before. And that brings us to a huge question we all have to think about for the future we're building. Right now, Zcash makes privacy a choice. But as our entire financial lives move online, should privacy be an optional feature you have to click a button for? Or should it be a basic right that's protected by default? That's a question we're all going to have to answer sooner or later. Bitcoin's blockchain, it's absolutely revolutionary, right? There's just no denying it. A decentralized, censorship-resistant way to store and send value. But what if I told you that its greatest strength, that radical transparency, is also one of its biggest, most fundamental flaws? Today, we're diving into Monero, a cryptocurrency that was built from the ground up to be the kind of digital cash a lot of people thought Bitcoin was supposed to be.
So let's just ask the question right out of the gate. Is your Bitcoin really anonymous? A lot of people think so. They think it's this secret, untraceable way to move money around. But that is a huge and frankly dangerous misconception. In reality, it's not even close. And understanding that one key difference is the first step to figuring out why a project like Monero even exists.
Okay, so here's the core of the problem. Every single transaction and every single wallet balance on the entire Bitcoin network is public. It's basically a giant open book for anyone and everyone to read. That means the government, hackers, even your nosy neighbor. And sure, your real name isn't attached directly to your wallet, but your entire financial history is there, just waiting for someone to connect the dots back to your real identity.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start by digging a little deeper into Bitcoin's transparency problem. Then we'll introduce Monero as the answer and break down the really clever tech it uses to hide, well, everything. After that, we'll get into its privacy by default philosophy, its ongoing fight against centralization, and finally, we'll talk about what the future might hold for it. First things first, let's just shatter this illusion of anonymity. Bitcoin isn't anonymous. It's what we call pseudonymous. The best way to think about it is like using a pen name. Your real name isn't on your Bitcoin address, but all of your activity, every transaction you've ever made is tied to that one pseudonym. The second someone links your real-world identity to that address, maybe from an exchange where you signed up, your entire financial history is exposed, permanently. Now, this lack of privacy creates another massive problem, and it's a word you hear a lot: fungibility. A fungible currency is one where every single unit is totally interchangeable. Think about a dollar bill. Your dollar is just as good as my dollar. Well, Bitcoin isn't really fungible. A Bitcoin that has a shady history, maybe it came from a hack, can get tainted and even blacklisted by exchanges. With Monero, that entire problem just vanishes. Every coin is identical and indistinguishable from the next, making it work exactly like physical cash. And this is exactly where Monero enters the picture. It was launched way back in 2014, and it was designed from day one with a single purpose: to be true, peer-to-peer digital cash, built specifically to bring back the privacy and the fungibility that Bitcoin was missing.
Monero's goal is actually pretty simple to understand. It wants you to be able to share your public address freely, kind of like an email address, without letting anyone, and I mean anyone, see how much money you have, where it came from, or where it's going. It's built for total financial privacy, a shield from any and all prying eyes. So you're probably wondering, how does Monero actually pull this off? It's not magic. It relies on two brilliant pieces of cryptography that work together to make its blockchain completely, totally opaque.
First up, you've got something called stealth addresses, and this is just genius. When someone sends you Monero, they don't actually send it to your main public address that everyone knows. Instead, their wallet creates a brand new, unique, one-time use address just for that single transaction. This means there's no way for an outsider to link all the incoming payments and figure out who's sending you money. The second piece of this privacy puzzle is called ring signatures, and their job is to hide the sender. Imagine a group of people all need to sign one document. With a ring signature, you get one valid signature from the group, but it's computationally impossible to prove which specific person actually held the pen. That's exactly how this works. Your transaction signature gets mixed in with a whole ring of others, which makes the true origin completely untraceable.
So, let's put it all together. A stealth address is created to hide the person receiving the money. A ring signature is used to hide the person sending the money. Then, only the actual recipient, using their special private view key, can scan the blockchain and find the funds that are meant for them. The end result? The sender, the receiver, and the amount are all completely hidden from public view. Total privacy.
Now, all this amazing technology leads to a really, really important ideological difference. It's something that truly sets Monero apart from other so-called privacy coins out there. The best way to get this is to compare Monero to another privacy coin, Zcash. With Monero, privacy isn't an option you can turn on or off. It's mandatory for every single transaction. And what that means is that every single user automatically makes the privacy of the entire network stronger.
With opt-in systems like Zcash, most people just stick with the default transparent transactions, which actually makes the few people who do choose privacy stand out even more.
And this creates this weird social problem. As one of our sources points out, with these opt-in systems, those who use shielded transactions are immediately viewed with suspicion as having something to hide. You see, if you have to go out of your way to be private, you immediately look suspicious. But with Monero, since everyone is private by default, nobody stands out. It's a completely different philosophy.
And Monero's philosophy goes way beyond just its tech. It's baked right into its development and its governance. The community is just fiercely dedicated to fighting any force that could possibly lead to centralization because they see that as a direct threat to privacy.
And believe me, this community is serious. They're famously against specialized mining hardware, ASICs, because those can lead to a few big players controlling the network. They have literally upgraded the entire network multiple times just to kick those machines off. Their mining algorithm, RandomX, is built to work best on regular old computer CPUs, which levels the playing field for everyone. This isn't some corporate project. There's no founder's reward, and it's funded entirely by community donations. It is driven by pure ideology.
Even its economic model is totally different. You know how Bitcoin has that fixed supply of 21 million coins? Well, Monero has something called a tail emission. After the main supply is mined out, it'll keep creating a tiny 0.6 XMR per block forever. Now, why would they do that? It's to give miners a permanent economic reason to keep securing the network long into the future. It's a pretty forward-thinking design. But, being this good at privacy, well, it comes at a very steep price. And this brings us to the central conflict that really defines Monero's existence and its very uncertain future. Because it works so incredibly well, Monero is seen by a lot of regulators around the world as crypto's public enemy number one. Its greatest strength, its effectiveness, is also its biggest liability in a world that is demanding more and more financial surveillance.
And this has very real-world consequences. We're seeing more and more regulatory pressure, which is leading major exchanges to delist Monero. I mean, it puts them in a tough spot, right? They can't track transactions to comply with regulations. And this big squeeze could create serious liquidity problems down the road, making it harder for everyday people to buy and sell.
But here's the crazy thing. Despite all those regulatory storm clouds, the demand for what Monero offers is just undeniable. From its lowest price point ever to its all-time high, Monero's value grew by nearly 2,000 times. That is a powerful, powerful signal that a huge part of the marketplace and extremely high value on real, true financial privacy. To put that number into perspective for you, a simple $100 investment at the bottom, if you sold it at the top, could have potentially become $197,000. That just shows you the incredible demand for a currency that actually works like true digital cash.
And all of this leaves us with the ultimate question. Monero has proven, without a doubt, that the technology for untraceable digital cash really works. But it exists in a world where governments are demanding more financial surveillance, not less. So, in this huge global push for transparency, can true privacy even survive? That is the multi-billion-dollar question we're all going to be watching unfold.
All right, so today we're diving into a crypto that's all about one thing: total, absolute privacy. It's called Verge, and its whole mission is to make every single transaction completely anonymous. So, how do they pull that off? Let's get into it. So, you're into crypto, and you probably think your transactions are private, right? Completely secret? Well, that's a super common assumption. But for most of the big coins out there, it's not exactly true. Let's start with the biggest one of them all. Because on the Bitcoin network, they're not. Simple as that. Bitcoin transactions are actually traceable. And, with a little bit of digging, someone could potentially unravel a user's entire financial history. And that right there is Bitcoin's big privacy problem. It's the whole reason coins like Verge even exist. They were literally built to solve this. And it all boils down to one key concept about how Bitcoin works. See, Bitcoin isn't anonymous, it's pseudonymous. What does that mean? Well, think of it like writing a book under a pen name. All your transactions are linked to a public address, your pseudonym. But here's the catch. If anyone, connects that address to your real identity just once, boom, your entire transaction history is out in the open. It's a pretty flimsy shield when you think about it. So, this fragile privacy, this major gap in the system, that's exactly where Verge comes in. It was designed from the ground up with one mission: to be the real solution for true anonymity.
I mean, you can't get much clearer than their core mission statement. Bitcoin is not anonymous, and Verge is striving for complete anonymity. This isn't about being a little bit more private. No, this is a full-on commitment to making transactions completely untraceable.
And this project has been in the game for a while. It actually kicked off way back in 2014 as .coin Dark. Then, a couple of years later, in 2016, it got a rebrand and became Verge. And this was more than just a new logo. It was a shift in focus, aiming for mass adoption, making private cryptos something you could use every day.
But what's really cool, I think, is how Verge came to be. It's a total grassroots project. We're talking completely open source. There was no ICO, no pre-mined coins, which means the developers didn't just hand themselves a bunch of coins at the start. The whole thing is run by its community of users, not some big company calling the shots.
Okay, so that all sounds great, but how does it actually work? How does Verge pull off this whole anonymity thing? Well, it's not just one magic trick. It's a whole suite of technologies working in concert. Let's get into the tech.
All right, so the first line of defense is all about hiding your digital location. Verge has things like Tor and I2P baked right in. The easiest way to think about this is like having a super secure, untraceable tunnel for all your transactions. By sending everything through this private network, it becomes almost impossible to track a transaction back to your actual IP address.
Now, this next part is probably Verge's killer feature. It's called the Wraith protocol. Honestly, the best way to describe it is like a light switch for your privacy. It puts you in control. Want to send some funds privately? Flip the switch on. Need a transaction to be public and transparent? Just flip it off. It's that simple.
And having that choice is a huge deal. When Wraith protocol is on, your transaction goes onto a private, invisible ledger. But hey, sometimes you need transparency, right? Imagine you're a business owner. You need a public record for your accounting? No problem. You just turn Wraith off and use the public ledger. It's all about giving the user that power to choose.
And they don't stop there. Verge adds another layer of privacy with something called stealth addressing. Basically, it generates a brand new one-time use address for the person receiving the funds in every single transaction. So even if the transaction itself is on the public ledger, the recipient's main address stays hidden, which protects their financial privacy.
But Verge isn't just a one-trick pony focused only on privacy. The project has bigger ambitions. They're also working hard to make the network super accessible, incredibly secure, and, ready for whatever the future holds. That whole community-driven thing we talked about, it even applies to mining. Get this, instead of just one mining algorithm like most coins, Verge has 5. Why does that matter? Well, it opens the door for way more people with different kinds of computers to get involved. That makes the whole network more decentralized. And, as a huge bonus, it makes it way, way harder for someone to launch a 51% attack and take over the network. And they're definitely not resting on their laurels. The team is looking to the future. They're planning to integrate Rootstock, or RSK, which would bring smart contracts to Verge. We're talking Ethereum-style functionality. On top of that, they're aiming for insane transaction speeds, up to 2,000 per second. If they pull that off, Verge could become a real player for everyday global payments. But, of course, whenever you talk about total anonymity, you're gonna get some controversy. It sparks this huge debate that goes right to the heart of our financial systems. How much privacy is too much?
So you've got two camps here. On one side, you have people saying, hey, financial privacy is a basic human right. It stops competitors from snooping on your business deals, and it protects regular people from having their entire financial history exposed. But then, on the other side, you have governments and critics who are worried that completely untraceable money could be a paradise for criminals. And that's the main argument they use when they talk about regulation.
So when you take all this tech and all this debate into account, where does Verge actually fit into the bigger picture? How does it stack up against the competition?
Make no mistake, the privacy coin space is a crowded field. You've got heavy hitters like Monero, which is private by default, always on. Then you have Zcash and Dash, which also offer privacy as an option. What makes Verge stand out? It's that Wraith protocol, that ability for the user to flip a switch between a public and private ledger. That's its unique angle. It's all about user-controlled privacy.
Okay, let's switch gears and talk about performance for a second. Because at its absolute peak, the market went wild for Verge's vision.
We're talking about a potential return of more than 3,000 times the investment. That's 3,157x to be exact. Let me put that into perspective for you. Imagine you put in just $100. At its peak, that $100 could have ballooned into over $315,000. It's an absolutely mind-blowing number, and it just goes to show you the insane potential and, let's be honest, the crazy volatility of the crypto world. And this really brings us full circle. As our lives become more and more digital, projects like Verge force us to confront a really big question. What do we actually think privacy is? Is it a fundamental right that should never be compromised? Is it just a feature, something we can toggle on and off when we feel like it? Or is it a risk that's just too big to take? In this new digital future, what's the true price of privacy? All right, let's talk about Beam. It's a cryptocurrency that's trying to solve one of the biggest head-scratchers in the entire digital world. You know, for the longest time in crypto, it's felt like you have to pick one. You can either have really strong privacy, but, well, your transactions are going to be slow. Or you get a super fast network, but then everybody and their brother can see what you're doing. It's this classic trade-off. Beam's whole reason for being is to just smash that compromise to bits. So how exactly do they pull that off?
So let's get right into it. What exactly is Beam? Well, at its core, it's a whole new take on digital currency, built from the ground up to fix that exact problem we just talked about.
It's really all about three main things. First, and this is a big one, privacy is the default. It's not an afterthought. Second, it's got to be scalable, right? It needs a network that won't get totally bogged down as more people use it. And third, it's got to be easy to use. Like, you shouldn't need a PhD to figure it out. It's a really tricky balancing act, trying to get privacy, transparency, and decentralization all in one package.
Okay, so what's the secret sauce here? What makes Beam work? Well, it all boils down to a single piece of tech, with a, let's just say, a pretty fun name, Mimblewimble. And yeah, this is the engine that drives the whole thing. Yep, Mimblewimble. You heard me right. And if you're a Harry Potter fan, that might sound familiar. It's named after a tongue-tying curse. The protocol itself popped up back in 2016, posted by some anonymous person. But look, don't let the quirky name fool you. This thing was built to tackle two of the biggest, most serious headaches in the whole blockchain space.
And what are those two problems? You guessed it, it's our old friends, privacy and scalability. Mimblewimble goes after both of them with some really clever crypto tricks. The whole goal is to finally give you the best of both worlds.
Okay, so let's start with privacy. How does it work? The magic ingredient is something called a blinding factor. The best way to think about it is like a digital invisibility cloak. It takes all the important info on a transaction, who sent it, who got it, and how much, and just scrambles it completely. The only people who can unscramble it are the people actually in the transaction. For everyone else looking in from the outside, it's just a bunch of gibberish. All right, so that's privacy covered. But what about that other big problem? Scalability. I mean, how do you stop the blockchain from just getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it's this massive multi-terabyte monster? Well, this is where the second bit of Mimblewimble magic comes in. It has this really cool feature called cut-through, and honestly, it's genius. So picture this. Alice pays Bob, and then a little later, Bob pays Carol. Instead of recording both of those transactions separately, Mimblewimble just cuts out the middleman. It basically erases the fact that Bob ever had the money and just creates one single smaller transaction that shows Alice paid Carol. It's a shortcut that dramatically cuts down on how much data you have to store. And why does that even matter? Well, it keeps the blockchain super light and efficient. So if you're a new user trying to join the network, you don't have to download this gigantic history of every single transaction that ever happened. No way. You just download the current state of things, which is way, way smaller. It makes the whole system faster and just easier for anyone to jump into. So Mimblewimble is the core technology, right? It's the foundation. But the team behind Beam didn't stop there. They've built a whole ecosystem around it, packed with some pretty unique features. So let's take a look at what makes Beam, the actual project, different. First, let's talk speed. Beam clocks in at around 17 transactions per second. Now, that's definitely a lot faster than something like Bitcoin for sure. But it's not exactly Visa-level speed yet. You're not going to be running a global payment system on it, at least not right now. And what's cool is the Beam team is totally upfront about this. They position Beam mostly as a store of value. Think of it less like digital cash you'd use to buy coffee and more like digital gold. That said, they are working on other solutions to really crank up that speed down the line. And you can see that practical thinking in its other features too. For instance, they have optional auditability. This is huge for businesses, right? It lets them be transparent when they need to be without splashing all their financial secrets on a public ledger. Plus, they had a fair launch, no ICO. They've had hardware wallet support from the get-go, which is great for security. They even built a decentralized marketplace for swapping coins right into the wallet. This is way more than just a coin. It's like a whole financial toolkit.
Now, what about the coin itself? Well, Beam has a hard cap. There's a finite supply. There will only ever be around 263 million Beam coins, period. And to control how those coins are released, they basically took a page right out of Bitcoin's book. They use a deflationary model. So every few years, the reward that miners get for creating new blocks gets cut in half. These are called halvings. This whole process slows down the creation of new coins, which makes the ones already out there more scarce and, in theory, more valuable.
Okay, so we've got the tech, we've got the features, we've got the tokenomics, but what's next for Beam? I mean, this project has a ton of potential, for sure. But let's be real, it's also swimming in an ocean with some very, very big sharks. And this is really where it gets interesting. How does Beam actually compare to the big dogs in the privacy space? You've got Monero, which is all about hardcore, pure anonymity. Then there's Zcash, which is more about giving you the option for transparency. Beam's big selling point is that it does both privacy and scalability really well. And that optional audit feature we talked about? Yeah, neither of its main competitors have that. That's a pretty big deal. If you look at its price history, it tells a pretty classic crypto story, full of risk and reward. I mean, this coin has been on a roller coaster, dipping as low as 68 cents and soaring all the way up to almost $2.50. Let me put that into perspective for you. If you had put $100 in, at the very bottom, it would have turned into about $350 at its peak. So yeah, there's definitely been some serious interest and momentum behind this project at times. But, we gotta pump the brakes a little. Beam wasn't born into an empty field. It's in a direct fight with some really established, well-funded projects. Trying to carve out a space for yourself when you're up against giants like Monero and Zcash, that is a massive uphill battle. And really, that leads us to the big million-dollar question, doesn't it? You could make a very strong case that Beam has better, more elegant tech, a solution that actually solves both privacy and scalability. But in the cutthroat world of crypto, is having the best tech enough to win? Or will the huge networks, the brand names, and the loyal users of its competitors be too much to overcome? Honestly, only time and the market is going to give us the answer to that one.
In the crypto world, there's a ton of hype. But today, we're looking at something different, a project that was intentionally built to be the opposite of hype. It's called Grin, and it's based on some really radical ideas about what privacy and fairness should look like.
So what's the deal with this project with the kind of funny name? Is it just another privacy coin in a sea of privacy coins? Or is there something fundamentally different going on under the hood? Let's dig in and find out.
Okay, so on the surface, Grin is a privacy-focused cryptocurrency. Simple enough, right? But the real magic, the thing that makes it totally unique, is the engine it's built on. This really innovative protocol with an even funnier name, Mimblewimble.
And that brings us to the tech itself, because Mimblewimble is a story in its own right. It wasn't actually made for Grin. It was first proposed as a way to fix some of Bitcoin's biggest issues, to improve its privacy, its scalability, and its fungibility. Grin just took that idea and ran with it, building a whole project around it.
Here's where things get really different. Think about Bitcoin. Its blockchain is like a public book where you can see every single transaction. All the inputs and outputs are there for everyone to see. While Mimblewimble just rips that page out. It completely throws that model away and replaces it with a system where all that info is kind of mashed together and hidden from view.
So how on earth does it do that? It uses this really cool cryptographic trick called a blinding factor. Seriously, it's like a digital magic trick. It just scrambles all the important data, who sent what, who got it, the addresses, all of it, so that if you're looking from the outside, it just looks like a bunch of random noise. Pretty amazing, right?
And this approach, it gives Grin some huge advantages. For starters, privacy isn't some extra feature you have to turn on. It's just on, by default. It's also super efficient, which means it can scale way better and saves a ton of space on the blockchain.
And maybe most importantly, it creates what we call true fungibility. That means every single Grin coin is the same as any other, just like $1 bill is the same as another.
But, the tech is really only half the story here. Grin's whole philosophy, its reason for being, is just as radical as its protocol. Right from day one, the community was laser-focused on building something as fair as it could possibly be.
And just think about what that means. There was no big ICO to rake in millions from venture capitalists, no pre-mine where the founders and insiders got a massive head start with a bunch of coins, and no founders reward constantly taking a cut from every block mined. Nope, this is a 100% open source project built for the community, by the community.
And that really gets to the spirit of this thing. There's no Grin Foundation or a CEO pulling the strings. Everything, all the development, all the progress is paid for by people who just believed in the project and decided to donate.
And just look at this. This really puts it into perspective. Grin has been built on donations that add up to about 190 Bitcoin. Now compare that to the crazy crypto boom back in 2017. You had projects raising over $30 million in these huge ICOs, and a lot of them, well, they just vanished without building a thing. It's a completely different mindset. Okay, so we've got this radical tech and this really principled philosophy. But what about the coin itself? How does the money work? Let's dive into Grin's economic model, because you guessed it, it's pretty unconventional too. First up, how new Grin gets created. It uses this unique algorithm called the cuckoo cycle. Now, you don't need to know the math behind it, but the key thing is that it was specifically designed to be resistant to ASICs, those super powerful specialized mining machines. The whole point is to keep mining decentralized, so more people with regular computers can actually participate. And now for maybe the most controversial part of Grin's whole design. Its monetary policy is so simple. One new Grin is created every single second. Forever. That's it. There is no hard cap, no maximum supply. Now I know what you're thinking. Constant inflation? Doesn't that mean the price has to go down? Well, not necessarily. The supporters have a really interesting counter-argument. As this quote points out, a predictable, steady supply doesn't automatically kill price appreciation. As long as more people want Grin than is being created, the price can still go up. Okay, so Grin sounds amazing in theory, right? But every project, no matter how great its ideals, has to survive in the real world. So let's get real for a minute and look at the challenges, the big hurdles that Grin is facing right now. And there are 3 big ones we need to talk about. First, it's just not that easy to get your hands on. It's not listed on most of the big, well-known exchanges. Second, like pretty much all privacy coins, it could run into some serious trouble with regulators. And third, there is a known vulnerability in its core technology. All right, let's be super clear about this vulnerability. Your funds are not at risk. An attacker can't steal your Grin. What they could potentially do, though, is link the sender and receiver of a transaction. So it could poke a hole in that privacy promise. But, and this is important, the actual amount of the transaction stays completely hidden.
And this is a really important point. This wasn't some surprise bug that caught everyone off guard. The developers have known about this potential issue from the very beginning. It's something the community is actively researching and trying to solve. It's very much a work in progress.
So when you put it all together, you've got the incredible tech, the super fair philosophy, but also these really serious challenges. The general vibe around the project is what experts are calling cautiously optimistic. The potential is massive, for sure, but the road ahead is definitely not going to be easy.
And that really leaves us with the million-dollar question, doesn't it? Grin is this fascinating experiment in tech, in economics, and in what a community can build. So, can a project that's built on such pure ideals actually overcome the messy, practical challenges of the real world? That's a question worth keeping an eye on.
All right, today we're diving into a project that has a seriously ambitious goal: building an entire, private, decentralized economy, right from the ground up. The project is called Particle. It's something we all kind of think about, right? Every single time you click that buy button, you're handing over your personal info, your payment details, your shopping habits. But what if there was a completely different way to do all of that? So to really get what Particle is all about, we've got to look at the problem it's trying to solve. I mean, we all love the convenience of online shopping, but it comes with some pretty big downsides that are often hiding in the fine print. And these issues, they're probably going to sound super familiar. We're talking about a fundamental lack of privacy, the constant risk of our data getting leaked in a breach, the potential for censorship, and of course, those sneaky transaction fees that always seem to pile on at the end.
And this is exactly where Particle enters the scene. It's positioning itself as a ground-up solution to these very problems, using the power and the core ideas of blockchain technology to do it. So what is it, really? Well, at its heart, Particle is a huge undertaking. It's not just another coin or a single app. It's an entire ecosystem that's designed to create a decentralized economy. And it's all built on these three key pillars: privacy, security, and making sure different systems can all work together smoothly. Okay, so that's the big idea. But how does it all actually work? To get a handle on it, we need to break it down into its three main components. And here they are, the three pillars. First, you've got the Particle platform, which is like the foundation of the whole thing. Then you have the Part coin, which is the fuel that makes the entire economy run. And finally, there's the open marketplace, which is the main event, the flagship app built on top of it all. Let's dig into the tech a bit. The platform is the base layer. You can almost think of it like the operating system on your computer. It's a space where developers can come and build their own decentralized apps, or D-apps, that are totally private. And the very first D-app built on this platform was Particle's own crown jewel, the open marketplace. Now for the Part coin. This is the lifeblood of the whole system. But it's not just for buying and selling things. If you hold Part, you actually get a say in where the project goes next, through voting on proposals. And on top of that, you can stake your coins to help keep the network secure and earn rewards for doing it. Okay, so in a world with literally thousands of crypto projects, what makes Particle stand out from the crowd? Well, it seems to boil down to three key things: how it launched, how it's governed, and some pretty cool tech. Let's talk about the launch, because this is a really big deal. A lot of crypto projects kick off with an ICO and a pre-mine, which basically means the founders get a huge chunk of coins before anyone else. Particle went a different route. No ICO, no pre-mine. And the thinking behind this, according to the source material, was to make the project more decentralized and hence fairer, right from day one. And that idea of fairness is baked right into how the project is run. Just like this quote says, it's not some top-down company calling all the shots. Anyone in the community can put forward an idea, and everyone who holds Part coins gets to vote on it. It puts real power into the hands of the users. Now here's another really cool piece of tech. Normally, to stake your coins, you have to keep them in a hot wallet that's connected to the internet, which isn't super secure. Well, Particle developed something called cold staking. It lets you stake and earn those rewards while your coins are tucked away safely offline in a hardware wallet. It's really the best of both worlds. You get the security and the income. All right, so we've covered the tech, the philosophy, but what about the money? Let's switch gears and take a look at how Particle has actually performed out there on the open market. So when you look at where people are trading this coin, one thing jumps out immediately. Wow. Over 80% of all the trading volume for Part happens on just one single exchange, Bittrex. And that's a really important detail. Yeah, that concentration leads us to another key challenge, which is liquidity. The source material points out that the overall trading volume is quite thin. So what does that mean in plain English? It means it could be tough to buy or sell a really large amount of Part without actually moving the price yourself. So let's track the price journey for a second. When Part first hit the exchanges, it kicked off trading at around $5.29. From that starting point, it went on a pretty significant run, eventually climbing all the way to an all-time high of $43.36. To put that into perspective, if you were somehow lucky enough to buy at the absolute bottom and sell at the absolute top, you'd be looking at an 8.2 times return on your investment. A hypothetical $100 could have turned into $820. Okay, so let's pull all of this together. After digging into the tech, the market, and the philosophy behind it, what's the big picture takeaway on Particle? Well, it's kind of a tale of two sides. On the one hand, Particle's major strengths are its really unique vision for a private marketplace and its deep commitment to being fair and decentralized, which you can see in things like cold staking. But on the other hand, the biggest challenge it faces seems to be adoption. It really needs to get on more exchanges and build up that trading volume to grow. And all of this leaves us with one final, absolutely fascinating question. In a world that's more and more dominated by huge, centralized companies that literally feed on our data, can a project that is built from the ground up on privacy and decentralization ever really break through and hit the mainstream? That's the challenge that Particle and a lot of projects like it are facing.
You know, when you think crypto, you probably think digital money, right? But what if a project was trying to build an entire ecosystem around privacy? Well, that's exactly the ambition behind Horizon. It started out as just another privacy coin, but oh boy, its vision has gotten way, way bigger. So let's dive in and break down what Horizon is all about and why you should probably care.
Okay, but before we get into the weeds, let's ask a fundamental question. Why does something like Horizon even need to exist? Well, it turns out it's trying to tackle a problem that, let's be honest, affects every single one of us. And that's the massive and, frankly, growing crisis in our digital privacy.
So, let me ask you this. Is your digital life really yours? It sounds like a simple question, right? But the answer? Well, it's getting more and more complicated every single day. I mean, we do everything online, but think about it. How much control do we actually have over our own data? I'm going to show you a number that really puts this whole problem into scary perspective.
Yeah? 60 million.
That's the staggering number of Americans who've been hit by identity theft. And here's the kicker. Cybersecurity experts say that number is just going to keep climbing. It's a pretty stark reminder that our digital lives, our digital identities, are constantly under attack. And here's the thing you really need to get. This isn't about your personal computer getting a virus. No. The biggest threat? The real danger is these huge, large-scale data breaches at the companies and governments that are supposed to be protecting our data. You see, it's a systemic problem, and a systemic problem needs a systemic solution. So what on earth could that look like?
All right, and this is exactly where Horizon steps onto the stage. It's not just positioning itself as another cryptocurrency. No, it's aiming to be a real solution to this huge data problem by building an entire ecosystem completely focused on privacy.
You see, the team behind Horizon looked around and said, we can do more than just create another anonymous way to send cash. Their vision was and is way bigger. They're building a full-fledged platform, basically a whole toolbox of privacy-focused solutions for, well, everyone, individuals and businesses.
And wow, I mean, just look at this. This really shows you how ambitious they are. We're not just talking about the Zen cryptocurrency. They're building Zen Chat, a private messenger, Zen Pub, an anonymous way to publish stuff, and even Zen Hide, which helps cover your tracks online. And the whole thing is run by a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. That just means the community is in charge, not some central company. It's the whole shebang, really, a super comprehensive approach.
So, okay, that's the big picture, the grand vision. But how does it all actually work, right? Let's pop the hood and take a look at the tech and the history that makes Horizon tick.
So Horizon's story really kicks off back in 2017. It started as a fork of Zclassic and was called Zcash. It had a pretty wild ride, hitting an all-time high in early 2018. But then they did something interesting. They rebranded to Horizon. And listen, this wasn't just slapping a new label on the can. It was a huge signal that they were moving beyond being just a privacy coin and into this much broader ecosystem we're talking about today.
Okay, so the magic behind Horizon's privacy features, it's this incredibly powerful technology called ZK snarks. They got it from Zcash. Now, don't let the name scare you. Think of it like this. Imagine you need to prove you know the secret password to get into a club, but you don't want to actually say the password out loud. ZK snarks let you do exactly that. It's a cryptographic trick to prove something is true without revealing any of the secret info behind it. Pretty cool, right?
Now, here's something that really makes Horizon stand out, how it pays for itself. With Bitcoin, for example, 100% of the rewards for making a new block go to the miners. Simple. But Horizon does it differently. They split it. As you can see here, miners still get the biggest piece of the pie, 70%, but that other 30%, that gets plowed right back into the ecosystem. It funds the nodes that keep the network secure and a treasury that pays for development. It's a model that's built to last, for long-term sustainability.
And for you number crunchers out there, here's a quick look at the core tokenomics. It's going to look pretty familiar if you know Bitcoin. There's a hard cap of 21 million Zine coins. That's it. No more will ever be made. And just like Bitcoin, the reward for mining gets cut in half about every 4 years. It runs on proof of work, and a new block gets added to the chain every 2.5 minutes or so. These are tried and true mechanics, and they give the project a really solid, predictable economic base.
But of course, no project in the crypto space is perfect, and it's not all sunshine and roses. To really get the full picture, we have to talk about the criticisms and the controversies. And for Horizon, a lot of that baggage comes from its family tree, from the fact that it's a fork of Zcash.
All right, so the first big critique is a little technical, but stick with me because it's a big deal. It basically calls into question the entire foundation of the coin's integrity.
It's all about something called the trusted setup. Okay, so what does that mean? In simple terms, when they first created the cryptographic keys for the system, it was this supercritical, one-time-only event. Now, here's the scary part. If just one person involved in that ceremony was compromised or dishonest, they could theoretically have the power to just print unlimited, untraceable Zen coins out of thin air. Not good.
But wait, there's more. There's another rumor, and this one is arguably even more serious. It's an allegation that there might be a deliberate backdoor built right into the code.
So the rumor goes like this. The original code for Zcash, which, remember, Horizon is built on, might have had a secret backdoor for police or government agencies. Now, I have to be absolutely crystal clear here. Just like our source material emphasizes, there is zero proof of this. For Horizon and for Zcash, this is pure speculation, a rumor, nothing more.
Okay, so despite those concerns from the past, the Horizon team isn't just sitting around. They have a very clear strategy for the future, and it involves a pretty major pivot. They're going after a whole new type of user.
So instead of fighting it out in the super crowded market for individual privacy geeks, Horizon is shifting its focus to enterprise users. You know, big companies. And the logic here is actually pretty simple. Businesses need privacy solutions, big time. Once they find one they like, they tend to be super loyal customers. And, most importantly, they've got the deep pockets to pay for that technology for the long haul.
And that really brings us to the core challenge, the make or break moment for Horizon. On one hand, you have this incredibly ambitious vision, right? A sustainable ecosystem with a whole suite of tools for business. But on the other hand, the hurdles are pretty huge. They've got to shake off those old rumors. They need to get more people actually using the platform. And the biggest one of all, they absolutely have to deliver their SDK. That's the software development kit. It's the toolbox that developers need to build all the cool apps on Horizon. Without it, the vision is just, well, a vision.
So, this all leads us to the final big question. Horizon is making a really bold bet here. They're betting that the future of privacy tech isn't just about anonymous payments for you and me, but about building these powerful, scalable solutions for the entire corporate world. Now, and it's a big if they can actually deliver on that vision and get past those hurdles, they could carve out a seriously valuable niche for themselves in the blockchain world. So the question remains, can they pull it off?
All right, so you're looking at the crypto market, and there are literally thousands of projects out there, right? And every single one is promising to be the next big thing. It's overwhelming. So how in the world do you separate the real game changers from the absolute traps? Well, that's exactly what we're going to tackle today. Think of this as your personal survival guide to evaluating crypto. You know, maybe you're even asking a really specific question, something like this one about privacy coins. And it's a smart question to ask, but the answer? It's probably not what you're expecting. And I'm going to be straight with you, the answer might not be what you want to hear. But believe me, it is the single most important thing you need to understand before you even think about investing your money.
Okay, let's just dive right into it. The first, most fundamental rule of crypto investing is what I like to call the no guarantees rule. This is the hard truth that really separates the successful investors from the people who, well, get burned. This is the core message from our source material, and it is so important it's worth saying again. There is no truly safe crypto asset. None. Zero. This market is volatile, it's experimental, and there are absolutely, positively no guarantees of profit. So, here's the crucial takeaway from that. If you ever see a project promising you guaranteed daily, weekly, or monthly profits, that is the biggest, brightest red flag you will ever see. Just think about the infamous BitConnect disaster, where people lost their entire life savings chasing promises that were, let's be honest, just way too good to be true. A lot of these scams use a classic trick called a pump and dump. Basically, insiders hype up a coin like crazy, causing its price to just skyrocket. Then, once all the excited, unsuspecting buyers have piled in, they dump all their holdings, crashing the price and walking away with the profits. And be careful, these aren't always quick one-day things. Some of these schemes can be orchestrated over weeks or even months. Okay, so if there's no perfectly safe coin, what's the solution? The solution is to change the question we're asking. Instead of asking, what should I buy, we need to learn how to think. This is your Crypto Investigation Toolkit, a framework to help you do your own research.
So this is it. This is your 6-step investigation plan.
Let's just walk through it together. First up, origins and funding. How did this whole thing start? Dig into the white paper. Was it a fair launch, or did a bunch of insiders get a huge pre-mined head start? Next, purpose and progress. What problem does this project actually solve? And more importantly, what have they really accomplished so far? You should check their GitHub to see if there's any actual development happening. Third, the technical foundation. What technology is it even built on? Is that foundation secure and proven? Fourth is market presence. Can you actually trade it on reputable exchanges? And crucially, is there enough trading volume, enough liquidity for you to sell if you need to? Fifth, its history. How long has it been around? Now, a long history isn't a guarantee of safety, remember BitConnect, but a brand new project definitely carries more risk. And finally, number 6, spot the red flags. Does the price growth look unnatural? Does it just seem too good to be true? That could be a sign you're walking into a trap.
Now, I know that might seem like a lot to remember, so let's make this toolkit really practical. We're going to apply it to 2 very different projects, and you'll see how quickly these questions can start to paint a much clearer picture.
We're going to put BitConnect, that notorious scam we just talked about, head-to-head with Bitcoin, the original crypto experiment. And trust me, the contrasts could not be more obvious.
And this just illustrates the difference perfectly. Just look at BitConnect. After a year of doing basically nothing, it was suddenly promoted everywhere with these wild promises of huge, guaranteed returns. Its value was pure hype, a textbook pump and dump that, of course, eventually collapsed, costing people everything. Now compare that to Bitcoin. It had a fair launch, mined by volunteers, there was no ICO, no big fundraising event. For a long time, it was worth nothing. Its value grew organically over years as a community actually built around it. It wasn't an overnight sensation. It was a long-term, groundbreaking experiment.
So, we've looked at the dangers, and we've built a toolkit. This brings us to the single most important investment you can possibly make in the crypto space. And spoiler alert, it's not a coin or a token. Your most valuable asset is your own ability to do thorough, skeptical, and independent research. The goal isn't to find some mythical, safe coin. It's to become a smart researcher who can navigate this landscape with confidence.
So, what should you take away from all this? Here's your final checklist. 1. Always be skeptical, even with projects that everyone is talking about. 2. Guaranteed profit is the biggest red flag there is. Treat it as a sign to run, not invest. 3. Use a critical framework, like the 6 steps we talked about, to do your own research. And 4. Look beyond the flashy price chart and really try to understand a project's history and its purpose.
So we'll end on this thought. The most powerful shift you can make is to stop asking, what should I buy, and start asking, how will I investigate? Answering that question for yourself, that's the real key to navigating the world of crypto. Thanks for joining us.
Let's talk about our money for a second. How much we have, what we spend it on, who we send it to. In this digital age, a lot of that info is basically an open book. But what if there was a type of digital cash that was completely, totally private, untraceable? Well, that's the promise of Monero. It's a cryptocurrency built from the ground up for privacy. And as we're about to see, it's right in the middle of this high-stakes battle to see if its code can actually be cracked. Okay, right off the bat, we have to clear up one of the biggest myths in crypto. If you're using Bitcoin or Ethereum, I've got news for you. Your transactions are not anonymous. Not even close. Sure, your name isn't directly on them, but every single transaction is carved into a public ledger for the whole world to see forever. You really see the difference when you put Bitcoin side by side with, regular old cash. With Bitcoin, a coin's entire life story is attached to it. So if a coin was part of a hack 5 years ago, that history follows it around. It can become tainted, maybe even worth less than a clean coin. That means one Bitcoin isn't always the same as another. But a dollar bill? A dollar is just a dollar. It has no memory.
And that, right there, is the problem Monero was built to solve. From day one, the goal was to be the true digital version of cash. Private, untraceable, and where every single coin is equal to every other coin. So the big question is, how on earth does it pull off this digital vanishing act?
Look, the technology behind this is incredibly complex, but the outcome for you, the user, is beautifully simple. It boils down to 3 things. First, it hides who sent the money using something called ring signatures, which is kind of like hiding one person's signature in a group of decoys. Second, it hides who received the money with stealth addresses, so only the 2 people involved know the real destination. And third, it hides the amount. Sender, recipient, amount, all of it just disappears.
The end result is what our source material perfectly calls a black box of privacy magic. Outsiders can see that a transaction happened, but that's it, no details.
No who, no where, no how much. It really is the privacy of cash, but for the digital world.
So as you can probably imagine, when you build a technology this powerful, you don't go unnoticed. This kind of unbreakable privacy has put Monero directly in the crosshairs of some of the most powerful organizations on the planet.
And we're not talking about small-time opposition here. This is a global coordinated effort. We're talking the IRS, the FBI, the DEA, Europol. It's basically a who's who of the world's most powerful law enforcement agencies. And they don't see Monero as a tool for privacy. They see it as a massive roadblock to their investigations.
This isn't just them talking either. They're putting serious money behind this. The IRS actually put out a bounty, $625,000 to any company that could figure out a way to trace Monero transactions. This is an active, well-funded campaign to break the very thing Monero was designed to do.
But this is where the pressure gets really intense. The U.S. Department of Justice, in its official cryptocurrency framework, said that simply using privacy coins could be seen as indicative of possible criminal conduct. Just think about that. They're suggesting that the desire for financial privacy is in itself suspicious.
But this isn't a story about Monero just sitting there and taking it. No way. This is a story about a deeply ideological community of developers, true cypherpunks, who are constantly building and innovating to counter these threats. So let's look at how they're fighting back.
Okay, one of the biggest threats is getting cut off from the world. Regulators pressure crypto exchanges, and those exchanges start delisting Monero, so it gets harder to buy and sell. The community solution, something called atomic swaps. It's a brilliant decentralized way to trade Bitcoin directly from Monero, with no company, no exchange, no middleman. It's a direct counterpunch to the gatekeepers.
The other huge threat is losing control of the network itself. These super specialized mining computers called ASICs could let a few giant mining farms take over. So what did Monero do? They completely changed the rules of the game. They switched to a new mining algorithm called RandomX. And what's so special about it? It's designed to work best on the CPU in your regular home computer. This move put power right back in the hands of individuals, making the whole network more secure and decentralized.
And the work never stops. This project is always evolving. For example, they rolled out a huge upgrade called Bulletproofs that made transactions way smaller. And smaller transactions mean they're much faster and a whole lot cheaper to send. It's a project that's dedicated to getting better and staying ahead of the curve.
So, Monero has definitely proven it can defend itself. But what's the long-term case for its survival? Why should we believe this thing is actually built to last?
Well, the data really speaks for itself. Despite all the pressure, all the scary headlines, the actual number of people using Monero is at an all-time high, and it just keeps climbing. That tells you there's real organic demand for what Monero offers. People want this.
And you know what? That long-term survival is literally baked into its code. See, Bitcoin's reward for miners will eventually drop to zero, leaving them to rely only on transaction fees, which is a big question mark for future security. Monero has something called a tail emission. It's a small, permanent block reward that never goes away. It guarantees miners will always have an incentive to secure the network. It's an incredibly forward-thinking solution for a problem that's decades away.
So, when you put all the pieces together, you get a pretty simple but powerful formula, right? You have user demand that is clearly and steadily growing, and you combine that with a supply schedule that is predictable and designed for permanent security. From an economic standpoint, that's a very compelling case.
And all of this brings us to one final crucial question. As our entire lives move online, we have to decide what we think about privacy. Is the ability to spend your money without being watched just a luxury for a few people? Or is it a fundamental right, an absolute necessity for everyone? The story of Monero shows us that this isn't some academic debate anymore. That battle is already here.
All right, let's talk about something that a lot of people in the crypto world, well, they'd kind of rather not. Regulation. I get it. It's not nearly as exciting as finding the next big coin, but there's a storm brewing on the horizon, and you need to know what's coming. Because make no mistake, it is coming. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll dive into crypto's Wild West reputation. Then we'll look at the huge shift in investors that's basically forcing the government's hand. We're also going to see how entire countries are getting in on the action, unpack why it's so darn hard to regulate this stuff, and finally, we'll introduce you to the new sheriffs in town. Let's do this. First up, crypto's risky reputation. People call it the Wild West of finance for a reason, you know? The chance to strike it rich is absolutely massive, but so is the chance for it all to go horribly wrong.
And this quote, wow, it just gets right to the point, doesn't it? We've all heard the horror stories. I mean, think about the whole BitConnect scam, where people were promised these insane returns and then poof, it was all gone. We're not talking about numbers on a screen. We're talking about the life savings of thousands and thousands of real people. And it's exactly these kinds of disasters that have put regulation on the fast track.
You know, this leads to a really tough question. When an exchange that you trust lists some new token, it makes it feel legit, right? So when it turns out to be a total scam, who's really on the hook? The scammers who cooked it up, or the platform that basically opened the door for them? This exact problem is why regulators feel like they have to step in and draw some clear lines in the sand.
Okay, so moving on to our second point. This isn't just about stopping the bad guys. There's also this massive economic shift happening that the powers that be just can't afford to ignore anymore.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the massive generational gap this shows. Regulators are seeing that younger investors, those under 40, are just walking away from traditional stuff like stocks and bonds. And why? Because it feels slow. The returns aren't that exciting. So instead, they're jumping headfirst into the high-risk, but potentially super high-reward world of crypto. And all of that money flowing into this unregulated space, that's a giant red flag for the financial authorities. And get this, it's not just regular investors anymore. The really big players are starting to get involved, and I mean entire countries. When a government decides it wants in on the game, the stakes get way, way higher. Just look at this list. This is a global thing now. You've got countries like Venezuela with its oil-backed petro, but you've also got huge economies like Brazil, India, and Russia all working on their own national digital coins. When governments start making their own crypto, they're kind of forced to regulate the whole space. I mean, you can't just reave your own currency in some legal no man's land, right? So, I know what you might be thinking. If all this is happening and regulation is a sure thing, what is taking so long? Why is it taking forever to get some clear rules? Well, it's complicated. Here's the real issue. You can't make rules for something you don't understand. A lot of these regulators, they come from the old school world of finance. This tech is completely new to them. So they're basically having to go back to school to learn everything from how a blockchain works to what a digital wallet even is. And that whole process of learning and talking to experts, it just takes time. And this right here, this is one of the biggest headaches of all. What is a crypto asset, really? Is it a utility token, which is kind of like a token at an arcade that lets you play a game? Or is it a security, which is more like a stock, where you buy it hoping it'll be worth more later because of the work other people are doing? It might sound like just words, but the answer completely changes which government agency gets to be in charge and which laws apply. Getting this definition right is everything. Okay, so that brings us to our final section. We know why the rules are coming and why it's so tricky. So let's finally talk about who's actually going to be writing those rules and trying to tame this digital Wild West. So who's it going to be? Who are the watchdogs that are going to bring some law and order to the world of crypto? Now, you might be thinking of the usual suspects, right? The FBI, the CIA. But no, that's actually not where the real regulatory power is. The agencies in charge are ones you might not think of right away. In the United States, the main agency stepping up is the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. And their plan is pretty simple, really. They want to treat crypto exchanges just like stock exchanges. That means making them register, get official licenses, and this is the big one, classifying a lot of crypto assets as securities. That would put a massive chunk of the market right under their control. And we're seeing similar financial watchdogs all over the world starting to do the exact same thing. So, the bottom line is this. Regulation isn't an if anymore, it's a when and how. And that leaves all of us with a huge question about what's next. Are these new rules going to stamp out that innovative, anything-goes spirit of crypto's Wild West days? Or is this the very thing that crypto needs to finally grow up, earn mainstream trust, and really take off? We're just going to have to wait and see. Let's be real. The world of cryptocurrency can feel a bit like the Wild West, right? It's exciting, full of opportunity, but man, it can also be incredibly confusing and pretty risky. So if you're thinking about jumping in, how do you navigate this new frontier safely? How do you tell the real game changers from the pitfalls? Turns out the map you need might come from a place you'd least expect. All right, so let's get right into it.
To understand what's going on, we first need to meet the main financial regulator here in the United States. Think of them as the referee, who's been calling the shots in the investment world for a very, very long time. And that referee? Well, it's the SEC, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. Basically, this is the federal agency whose whole job is to keep the markets fair and to protect investors. You know, investors like you and me. And get this, they've been around for a while. The SEC was formed way back in 1934. So you've got this agency with nearly a century of experience now trying to get its arms around a brand new 21st century technology. Kind of wild when you think about it, right? So what's their actual job? What do they do all day? Well, they do a lot. Enforcing laws, making new rules, overseeing stock exchanges. But here's the key takeaway for us. If an investment is considered a security, and that just means you're buying something with the hope of making a profit from the work of other people, then it falls under their watch. And that is the key to understanding their role in crypto. Okay, so now you see where this is going, right? With digital assets just exploding onto the scene, you knew it wouldn't be long before this old school referee had to step onto a brand new field. And yeah, that's exactly what we're seeing happen. The SEC's view on this is pretty clear. Just because the asset is digital doesn't mean the rulebook gets thrown out the window. For them, it's a new market, sure, but the ref is still the same. So where are they putting their energy? Well, the source material shows they're really honing in on a couple of big areas. New cryptocurrencies and these things called ICOs, initial coin offerings. Think of them like the crypto world's version of a stock market launch. They're also putting online trading platforms on notice, telling them that if they want to trade these assets, they have to register, just like any other exchange. And this brings us to what's probably the most important part of this whole explainer. Because this isn't just about the SEC policing the market. It's about the tools they're providing to help you, the investor, make way smarter decisions. So the million-dollar question is, with all this going on, how do you actually protect yourself? How do you look at a potential crypto investment and make sure you're not about to throw your hard-earned cash into a black hole? And check this out. This might be the single most valuable tool we talk about today, and it comes directly from the source. The SEC themselves published a specific list of questions that they say every single person should ask before putting money into a crypto project. It's basically your official pre-flight checklist, straight from the regulators. So let's run through some of these. The first batch is all about the who and the what. First, who are you actually doing business with? Is it a real team with backgrounds you can check out, or just some anonymous name on the internet? And second, what is this thing you're buying? Is there a clear, simple description of the product? If you can't get straight answers to these basic questions, that is a massive red flag. And the list doesn't stop there. It digs right into the business itself. Do they have a written business plan that you can actually understand? Or is it all just buzzwords and hype? Who's out there promoting it? And this is a big one. Are they getting paid to do it? And finally, that little map icon, that's about location. Where in the world is this company physically located? Because if you can't find them, good luck getting any accountability. Another huge warning sign. So look, the SEC lays out the playbook, right? They're giving you the framework. But at the end of the day, it's your move. The power to actually ask these tough questions, well, that's in your hands. And hey, don't just take my word for it. The source material we're drawing from couldn't be more direct. It ends its analysis with this quote right here. The point is, the stuff the SEC puts out isn't just dry regulatory jargon. It's designed to be educational for you, and it's highly recommended reading for anybody in this space. So the bottom line is simple. Go straight to the source. Don't rely on the hype you see on social media or what some random person in a chat room says. The most reliable, objective information is going to come directly from the SEC's official website. Just pull up your browser and go to sec.gov. As the source material suggests, you can find their news and public statements. Type in cryptocurrencies and boom, all of their official guidance and investor alerts are right there for you. It's all there. So we're going to leave you with this one final thought. In a market that moves at lightning speed, sometimes the smartest thing you can do is just pause. So before you invest a single dollar, ask yourself, am I actually asking the right questions?
All right, let's talk crypto. Today we're going to tackle a massive question. With all this money flying around in the crypto world, who's actually watching the market? Who's the sheriff in town? Let's dive in.
You've heard this a million times, right? That crypto is the new Wild West. It's this exciting, kind of chaotic new frontier in finance, full of opportunity for sure, but also a place where the rules,
Well, they're not always so clear. So is that picture still accurate? And more importantly, is that starting to change? To really get a grip on the challenge here, you first have to appreciate just how unique the crypto landscape is. We're not just dealing with the new asset, we're talking about a whole new kind of market. And these three words right here really nail the problem. First, these markets are new. That means there's no playbook, no history to look back on. Second, they're constantly evolving. What's true today might be totally different tomorrow. And finally, they're international. They don't care about borders. You put all that together and you've got a real puzzle for any regulator trying to keep up.
So, who steps into this wild new frontier? Well, it turns out it's a seasoned guardian. If you're paying any attention to crypto, there is one agency you absolutely have to know about: the CFTC.
So what is the CFTC? It's the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission. Think of them as the traditional overseers for things we call commodities. You know, basic goods like oil, gold, even corn. Their main job is to make sure the markets for futures and options are fair and nobody's getting cheated. And these guys have been around the block. They were formed way back in 1975. So this isn't some brand new agency that just popped up for crypto. Nope. This is an old hand learning some very new tricks, and that brings a whole lot of weight and authority to the game.
Right, so you're probably wondering, how does an agency that was set up to watch over things like pork bellies and crude oil suddenly find itself in the middle of the Bitcoin universe? Well, let's get into it.
Okay, this is the key. The whole game changed with this one decision. The CFTC officially called Bitcoin a commodity. Boom! Just like that. They put it in the same bucket as gold or oil, and that one move was absolutely massive because it gave the CFTC the green light to step in and say, this is our turf.
And once they made that call, it gave them some real teeth. So, what can they actually do? First, they can fight fraud. If someone's running a scam involving Bitcoin, the CFTC can go after them. Second, they work to stop price manipulation and crack down on inside jobs at exchanges. And third, they directly regulate financial products tied to Bitcoin, like futures contracts. And trust me, this isn't just on paper. They've already brought some major cases using these powers. But here's the thing. The CFTC isn't going it alone. The crypto world is just too big and too complicated for any one agency to handle. It really takes a team effort.
And this is what that team up looks like. You've got the CFTC on one side, focused on Bitcoin as that raw commodity, fighting market abuse. Then, on the other side, you've got the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. They get involved when a crypto product starts to look and act like a security, kind of like a stock in a company. So they're covering different bases, but together, they're trying to police the whole field.
And when you look at what they're both trying to do, their shared mission is pretty clear. It's not about killing innovation, it's all about this: to bring transparency and integrity to these markets, to deter and prosecute fraud and abuse. It's about building a safer playground for everyone.
Okay, so we've got these big regulators stepping onto the scene, drawing lines in the sand. But what does all of this actually mean for the market? And, more importantly, what does it mean for you?
At the end of the day, this is really what it all boils down to. Having agencies like the CFTC get involved is all about building trust. It's an effort to make the markets more transparent, to fight back against the scams that give crypto a bad name, and to build a solid foundation of integrity so this whole new financial world can actually grow up.
And that leaves us with the million-dollar or maybe trillion-dollar question for the future, right? As these guardians finally bring some law and order to the Wild West, is this how crypto finally gets the mainstream trust it needs to really take off? Or does it lose that wild, rebellious edge that made it so revolutionary in the first place? That's the huge balancing act everyone is watching right now.
So, you're curious about crypto, right? But maybe a little worried about all the risks you hear about? Yeah, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're going to cut through all that noise around crypto regulation and figure out what it really means for someone who's just starting to dip their toes in. Look, it's the question that's probably on your mind whenever you hear those crazy stories about scams or hacks. Is anybody actually in charge here? Is anyone policing the space or looking out for the regular folks? For the longest time, the crypto market has had this reputation of being the Wild West, this exciting but pretty chaotic new frontier. And honestly, that reputation isn't totally unearned. Without a clear set of rules, it can be a total free-for-all for the bad guys. And hey, we're not talking about some small-time trouble here. We're talking about really serious financial crimes. Things like money laundering, terrorist financing, and of course the never-ending stream of scams trying to get your money. This is exactly the kind of stuff that makes so many people think twice before getting involved. So if crypto really is the Wild West, that kind of begs the question, is there a sheriff? Is any group actually stepping up to bring a little law and order? Well, you might be surprised to hear the answer is yes. So let's meet the watchdog. We're talking about an organization you might not have even heard of, but one that's been working behind the scenes for a long, long time. And its name is FinCEN. And really, the name says it all. FinCEN stands for the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Basically, their entire job is to follow the money, to collect and analyze financial info to stop the exact kinds of crimes we've been talking about. And look, this isn't some brand new agency they just threw together to deal with crypto. FinCEN has been around since 1990. We're talking decades before Bitcoin was even a thing. So they are a very established guardian that knows how to navigate complicated financial worlds. Their original mission has always been super clear. Go after money laundering all over the world, shut down terrorist financing, and just generally tackle major financial crime. Sounds a lot like the problems we just talked about in crypto, doesn't it? Okay, so you see where this is going, right? FinCEN is now taking all that experience and applying it to the world of digital currencies. But their goal isn't to shut crypto down. No, it's more like they're here to tidy things up. And this isn't just a rumor, it's official. FinCEN has come out and said, yep, we're stepping in. Their whole aim is to make sure these incredible new technologies aren't being hijacked for illegal purposes. So what does tidying up actually look like for you and me? Well, step 1, go after the big fish, the major criminals using crypto for their operations. And step 2, which is huge for everyday users, is all about working to get those scammers out of the space, hopefully making it a much safer place to be. But hold on a second. I know what you might be thinking. The word regulation can be a really scary one in the crypto community. I mean, wasn't the whole point to be outside the old financial system? So is having a government agency get involved actually a good thing? Okay, but here's the twist. The argument here is that for the average person, this kind of regulation isn't the bad guy in this story. In fact, it might just be the hero. This really cuts to the heart of it. I mean, who loses when the sheriff finally shows up? The outlaws, right? So yeah, regulation is definitely bad news for scammers and criminals. But who wins? The entire crypto market and every single legitimate person in it. It's about creating a safer place where cool ideas and investments can actually grow. So the bottom line is this. If we want the market to mature, and if we want regular people to feel safe enough to get involved, then this might be the perfect time for an experienced regulator like FinCEN to lay down some clear rules of the road. So, after all that, where do we stand? What's the one big idea you should really walk away with from all this talk about FinCEN and crypto? It all boils down to this really powerful quote. Let me read it. If Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are regulated, it also means that they are not illegal. Think about that for a second. Regulation isn't a ban. It's actually a sign that something is being taken seriously. To put it as simply as possible, regulation brings legitimacy. It's a green light to the rest of the world, to you, to businesses, to the big financial players. That crypto is a serious, recognized thing, and not just some passing fad in the digital Wild West. And that leaves us with one final, pretty massive question to chew on. As organizations like FinCEN start to make the crypto world safer, could this be the very thing, the bridge, that finally brings it into the mainstream for good? Now that is something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.